In the beginning, a man sat as if in meditation. Before him lay his sword, which would be part of his legacy. After fighting with it for over 100 years, he found the end of the sword. His health was weak, showing signs of fading. That man, covered in scars, faced his end, looking at his hands, thinking it had all been for nothing. Now he could only lament. After living a life obsessed with the sword, fallen on the ground, he simply wished he had lived an ordinary life, as the red-haired boy would say. The boy with blue hair and eyes wanted to know what he was talking about. He struck a few times, given how much he insisted on being ordinary. He questioned how the child of a woman who had destroyed an entire clan did not feel blessed for not being cast out. The prestigious house of poison and hidden weapon arts of the Tang Sichuan family had collapsed. One of the new powers of Morin brought them down, the Order of the Nine Witches, the Celestial Glow Demon Lord, Yun Yun Hyuk. If he ever fell in love with a woman, he would propose marriage, but if ignored or refused, he would take her by force. That fate befell the Sichuan Tang family, and the poison phoenix Tang Jiahai was his target, facing the Celestial Glow Demon. The Tang Sichuan family fought with all their might and emerged victorious. Now that red-haired young man was also facing a difficult path. His opponent, the boy with white hair and blue eyes, was still dealing with kicks. As angry as he was, he still had to hear that if he felt wronged, he should blame his own mother. That was the reality he had to face every day. Just because his mother had attracted the Demon Lord's attention and ruined the clan, he carried the resentful words of an entire clan on his shoulders. When he arrived home, his mother was worried about why he was so late. She also worried seeing him hurt like that. Running to her son, she asked why his face was like that, what had happened. Trying not to worry her further, he smiled just to reassure her. Even though she noticed he wasn't well, she asked if the children were still being hard on him, but he said he had tripped while playing. She worried that scars might remain on his face. However, he said he would be careful next time. He assured her she could rest easy. Very concerned, she asked if he had eaten, but he wasn't hungry at that moment. He just wanted to rest. He lay down on his bed. He knew it wasn't her fault, and he had no one to talk to either. Shouting or complaining would only make things worse, as that was how his father had met his end. Even if they left the Tang family, who would protect the mother and son? He thought things might be different if his father were still there. Another day, it was the same scene, the boys always attacking him. They pulled his hair and told him not to be so dramatic, as that was only the beginning. All he wanted to know was how long he would have to live like that. The beatings from those boys were frequent. He was tired of it all. The scene repeated day after day. It seemed they were never satisfied with tormenting him. This time, someone suggested they leave it, as they'd had enough fun. Said they had also prepared to play a little, even bringing their needle case. The boys muttered to each other that maybe this was the time. Since they were going to join the upcoming clan leader competition, they wanted to be ready and test their poisons beforehand. They just stood by, watching as they handled those poison needles. The most robust one, who sat on top of Yomyang, thought he should be grateful, as the wrong needle could paralyze him. Tang Jianzhou was the name of the boy holding him down so the girl could apply the poison. Proud of herself, she said she wouldn't kill him. As long as the poison's effect was confirmed, she would drink an antidote. She asked him to endure, as she really needed to see the final effects of the poison. She was excited, as his skin was reacting immediately, demanding he hold on a bit longer. After everyone left, it began to rain, and he lay on the ground, wondering how much longer he could endure it all. His condition was truly poor. He thought about what would happen if he just closed his eyes. It would be so much easier. But in his mind, he remembered his mother, and wondered who would protect her. He just wished he hadn't been born so weak. Such things might have prevented those people from chasing him. It wasn't much he wanted, just to become strong enough to protect himself and his mother. He also wanted to live a normal life. A bright light began to appear before him, forming a sword of light. The surprise of that light was so great that, for a moment, he forgot the pain he was feeling. It was a gleaming sword. He wondered since when it had been there, feeling certain he had never seen it before. Yet, it felt very familiar, as if he had wielded it before. So, he placed his hands on it. It felt as though it belonged to him, as if he had trained with that sword for over 100 years. He had reached the form of the sword, the beginning of the sword, the way of the sword, and even the final sword. And all of that had been to achieve a single thing. For this, how many lines had he drawn? But in the end, it was all very futile. Even having reached the end of the sword, he could not stop the approaching death. Regret consumed him completely. He thought that, if he could live again, he would want to live a normal life. In that life, he also remembered everything. Now he knew he had been a sword master in his past life, and in this life, he was Tang Yomyang. Even with memories of his previous life, from that moment on, he wanted to live a normal life. His mother was once again worried about letting him go out after he had come home quite injured the other day. But he always told her not to worry. Nothing would happen that would make her sad. It was the same cheerful face he wore each morning when he left, and once again, she was concerned. The boys lying in wait thought that Yeomyang might be avoiding them that day. Tang Jianjil had a theory that after getting beaten up by them, he wouldn't show up if he didn't want his mother to see his condition. Even so, he thought that boy was brave. That's not it. Whether he showed up or not, they would give him another beating. He also thought about dining with the others to mock him a little more. As one boasted, another's attention was drawn elsewhere, and he announced that their target was approaching. The girl in the tree thought he was late. Climbing down, she said she thought he wouldn't show up and was even a bit worried. She was already used to mocking him and hitting him whenever she wanted. She had a certain familiarity with him, so she told him to hurry up. That day, he didn't seem willing to join in those cruel games. He simply stopped in front of them, acting bravely. Even so, they had the nerve to ask if he'd had hard times. They were even concerned about how he showed up without any injuries. Yeomyang, looking him in the eyes, told Moonchan that it wasn't enough to hurt him. Still, they wanted to come out on top, and they sarcastically recounted what had happened the day before. Squeezing his arm, Tang Jianjil asked if he wanted a hot compress, looking him in the eyes. After saying the names of the two, he also said the girl's name. Tang Youngryang, upon hearing her name, asked if it was a happy occasion, since he was calling everyone by their names. She asked if he was unhappy and wanted to leave this world. She asked if the poison from yesterday hadn't been enough to double the dose that day too. Jianjil asked why he wasn't paying attention to the person in front of him. He grabbed that impulse with his hand and then threw the boys to the ground, causing some astonishment among those who were watching. They were surprised that a weakling had defeated a comrade with a single blow. The girl was certain he was inexperienced in martial arts, and suddenly, that had happened. They asked what they could do, and there were no reasons not to be able to do something. They themselves had said they were participating in a clan leader competition. He asked if they would dare to enter with just that level of skill. Moonchan realized he was entirely different from the previous day. Seeing that things were heading in a bad direction, he asked for calm, saying the other had just been caught by surprise. Moonchan knew he had trained for years for the competition. They wouldn't lose now. He said he would like to see if the same words would come out after facing his skills. His attack was stopped with a single hand. In his gaze, there was no fear or doubt. When he commented that if that was the level of the participants, he managed to capture the young man's attention, only to then break his fist with an intense blow, leaving the warning that he would be more than qualified for the clan leader competition. In the Hall of the Hidden Poison, it was originally the place where the clan leader resided, and where the family's main decisions were made. But the leader's position had been vacant for a long time. Now, it had become the Elder's Council Room. An elder communicated that, at the start of the meeting, he expressed his concern about the reduced participants for the competition. They were debating the final decision regarding the participation of Yeomyang, the son of the Poison Phoenix. However, he had not yet officially announced whether he would participate, but everyone knew he had been openly defeated. He had shown no accomplishments thus far. There should be no objection to excluding him from the competition. One of them questioned, for the young man in question was the son of the former clan leader. He thought that if they excluded him, it could call into question the legitimacy of future competitions. He didn't quite understand what he was trying to say, but wouldn't it be a bigger problem if someone inexperienced in martial arts lowered the standard? So, even if he had the blood of the previous leader, he was now nothing more than a burden to the family. As soon as he finished saying those harsh words, the door opened abruptly, revealing the silhouette of a person. That scene surprised the members of the meeting. The silhouette was of the young Tang Yeomyang. Realizing this, people became even more anxious. The elder asked if he understood what he was doing. However, the young man said he was aware. Everyone in the assembly was left speechless, witnessing the reaction of someone who had been silent for so long. They also saw him dragging an opponent as if they were nothing. He displayed one of the group members who had pursued him for so long, like a trophy. Looking at one of the elders, he said that he had endured a lot in that family all this time. But now he didn't intend to bear anything more, and showed his face with severe bruises as a gift. They were shocked because he had injured one of the participants in the young clan leader competition. They asked if he didn't know it was a crime to harm a competitor. However, he made it clear he was well aware of the family rules, but there was no problem with fighting between competition participants. At that moment, he made his intention to participate clear, just like the others. The elder wanted him to clarify if he was indeed expressing a desire to join the young leader competition. Yet, he asked if just that wasn't enough, he could do more. The elder didn't seem satisfied. Yeomyang stated that if he wanted, he could check the open grounds outside the main hall, as that was where Moonchan and Jianjil were. He had merely followed the family rule, to repay kindness doubly, revenge tenfold. Saying this, he was still holding that trophy by the hair, kneeling before him. The elder asked if he had proven his worth, and now wanted to enter the competition. They felt they couldn't allow him to participate, as he was taking advantage of crimes incited against competition participants. Another added that, regardless of legitimacy, he couldn't put the other participants at risk. The elder raised his hand and said to let him enter the competition. Everyone was left puzzled by the elder's decision to let him participate. If he appeared with such confidence, why should they prevent him, a legitimate and qualified person who was willing? Speaking to the boy, he said he expected that confidence to match his skills. He made it clear that if he did not become the young clan leader, he would pay for what happened that day. Returning home, his mother was quite fearful, thinking it was unwise for him to want to join the young leader competition. However, he informed her it was necessary. She noticed the decisive tone in his voice. It wasn't just an outburst or whim. She looked at him and recalled that his name was given with the meaning of surviving as much as possible. His mother thought he was still a child, but now she felt the hope of a great man. Looking at him, she said she wouldn't ask how he learned the techniques or how he overcame not one, but 3 children. However, she wanted him to answer one thing: was he confident about the young clan leader competition? He politely asked her, smiling, who she thought he was, as he was the son of the poison phoenix. She couldn't contain her emotions. Her eyes were already tearing up. She gave him a long, tight hug and said he had truly grown a lot, and she was very proud of him. He felt immense tenderness in his mother's embrace, and wanted to continue protecting the ordinary life he had chosen. He was unwilling to let anything disturb that life. Anything and anyone that tried to prevent him from achieving what he wanted, he would eliminate and remove from his path. After that day, a month passed. His uncle asked if he should let things be, thinking about the young leader competition. His mother asked him to leave it be. He had his reasons. He was no longer just a child acting without any plan. His uncle also noticed that his mentality, courage, and posture were remarkable for his age. His uncle was the young Dark King leader Tang Jiaqui. He said that regardless of the attitude he was showing, it couldn't end there, as his sister intervened in the conversation. She said he was concerned, but until now he had protected the family, and Yomiang as well, and she was deeply grateful. She explained that the situation he created was so significant that she had to intervene, and she couldn't help but have expectations too. Now that he remembered his past life, he began meditating and training alone. He was also eating clean, well-prepared meals made by his mother. He used internal methods to correct the twisted paths of ki, knowing that perfecting this skill at that moment, especially for someone awakened from a past life and who had reached the Sword Master realm, such things could be tested. However, it was essential to strengthen the vessel holding that power, which would be his body. Since he was only 12 years old, the meridians and pathways throughout his body were not clogged with impurities. Certainly, as his level increased, natural transformations would occur. Even so, it was worth remembering that the foundation of the body remained crucial. It would be necessary to maintain balance and focus on obtaining the necessary nutrition and rest for physical growth. The day of the competition had arrived, and his mother came to say goodbye. She asked them to take care of themselves. His brother, who would also be leaving, said goodbye to his sister. And as she watched the scene at that moment, she wished that Longriang could see how well their son had grown. She truly wished he could have had the chance to come. In the Dark King's hall, several competitors were gathered. With his plate of rice cakes, he thought he had arrived too early. The Dark King clan leader was absent. However, he overheard someone commenting about him as he noticed some people approaching him. They had heard he couldn't even learn martial arts, and thought it was absurd that someone like him was participating in the competition. Looking at him, they said that the young clan leader competition standards had dropped. They said some discipline was needed when one of them was suddenly hit in the face by a rice cake. Immediately, he fell to the ground, and the others shouted that the guy had a hidden weapon. However, they observed that it wasn't a weapon. It was just a half-eaten rice cake. They wouldn't leave him alone. However, they were warned that Moon-chan only had 2 companions, yet they were a group. But they hadn't heard how Moon-chan and his group had been defeated. They didn't mind asking who would be the first to experience it. By the way, even with a broken arm, Moon-chan didn't run away. Therefore, as participants in the competition, they wouldn't flee either. They began attacking him all at once. Blows were exchanged equally among them all. The Dark King noticed some commotion among the competitors. He observed that one boy, a competition participant, noticed that things could get out of control. He approached angrily, drawing attention to the confusion and asking what they thought they were doing. There were several boys on the ground, complaining of sore bodies. Yomian was still eating his rice cakes, sitting on a few of them, and mentioned that he was bored from waiting. He asked them not to misunderstand. It was the boys who had started the trouble, and he asked them to take it easy on him. Explaining to the elder what had happened wasn't easy. The elder was angry because there were multiple injuries just before the competition. He was concerned because if such a person became the clan leader, things could certainly worsen. At the meeting, they decided to change the competition rules. 2 girls were discussing how the competition was conducted. However, One replied that it was on the mountain for 2 to 3 years. Finding the girl's intelligence strange, she looked to the side and asked who she was. She replied that she had just answered the question. The girl with violet hair had heard that the competition details were confidential. The other girl, with pink hair and glasses, said her father worked in the general office and had received that information. The Dark King clan leader called for silence and announced that he would be overseeing the competition. He would also explain the order of everything. Many competitors were excited to see the youngest leader of all time, Jiakui. It was explained that the competition lasted 4 years. 3 years would be for practicing throwing skills. The first year was to find a suitable practice method for each individual to follow, regardless of their abilities. In the next 2 years, under the guidance of designated warriors, comprehensive training was conducted. After all the training was completed, the main competition would begin. The form of the competition would be. At that moment, the Great Elder intervened and announced that the match would be conducted using goo poison. Those words left several competitors terrified. They even wanted to know if it was the goo poison they were familiar with. From that point, it referred to a personal combat competition where participants would fight until only one person remained. The great leader explained that originally, they were supposed to select the young clan leader through single duels, one-on-one. If they continued according to the original rules, such incidents could repeat. They changed the competition format to allow everyone to exercise their full power. Everyone knew it was because of Tang Yonmiang. The elder continued, saying that the young clan leader position was crucial for the future of the Tang family. He told them to fight and survive. Whoever emerged victorious would inherit everything from the Tang Sichuan family. The number of competitors who would survive the goo poison would be only one. From that moment on, everyone was a powerful rival against each other. Yonmiang didn't think it would be difficult. In Sichuan province, in the territory of the Black Death Alliance, the main camp of the Dark Moon Sword sect, the meeting hall. Someone started the meeting, knowing that everyone was busy with their duties. However, the Tang family. It was the topic of this meeting. One person asked if they were referring to the young leader competition. They mentioned that the Tang family's current state was poor, and even the leader could eliminate them at any moment if he wanted. But for now, he was leaving them alone because they were still useful. However, it was obvious that those children would be the future of the Tang family. If anything went wrong, it would deal a blow. Someone at the meeting judged the elder's word to be true. Another felt that, even in decline, the Tang family was still an entity they should distrust. Therefore, they wouldn't do anything, but if they simply followed the carriages and removed the buds the Tang family was trying to cultivate. On the other hand, this wouldn't deal a significant blow to that family. However, the Tang family's young leader competition lasted a total of 4 years. If, after all that effort, all the carefully cultivated children died at the competition's climax, that would indeed be a fatal blow. A woman at the meeting wanted to know if they would do as they did with the Jiggle family, or the Muang Yodong family. The Dark Moon Sword sect leader agreed and said that was all for now. They would only track the carriage's location. It was said that tracking was already in progress, and not only that, but they had also planted a small seed. Perhaps the Tang family would fall completely into their hands. On the local mountain of the Tang clan's young leader competition, everyone followed the leader, except for one who stayed behind, contemplating something. Participants would be called by number instead of names. Each group consisted of 4 people and would be in groups 7. Stating their names, the designated numbers were called out. When they reached number 28, they noticed someone was missing. They kept calling for number 28, and looking at the boy, they asked why he was lagging behind. He apologized, saying he was daydreaming. Not satisfied, the guide said they didn't have time to waste thinking about trivial things. In truth, he had stayed behind because he sensed a presence, and was frightened since the person in charge couldn't sense it. He was certain it wasn't a common relative or escort from the Tang family. He was sure they were being followed. When they reached a cliff, they asked the instructor if that was the place. Out of nowhere, the cliff spoke to them and asked for the correct password for group 7. The student from that group shouted that it was the Hidden Poison King. Instantly, the password was confirmed. This also surprised 3 members of the group. Someone said it was a pleasure to meet them, and a man came out, introducing himself as Jiggle Changshin. As the Tang family was once masters in formations, but now fallen due to the Demon Lord's invasion, and without the Tang family's support, their family wouldn't have survived. In return, they would prevent external forces from interfering in the competition. He explained that the Jiggle family would assist through formations. Some were surprised, as the formation technique could determine station or space. The violet-haired girl was concerned, noticing that young Tang Yonmiang seemed odd. He wasn't focusing on anything, as he had last time. She remembered he was also like that in the carriage. She recalled being told they'd be together for 3 years. His face showed no interest in any of them. When he was asked to introduce himself, he didn't even say his name. They had to ask and confirm it with him. The pink-haired girl with glasses introduced herself as Tang Yuri and mentioned the fight from the other day. The other, quite cheerful, introduced himself as Tang Aijin and said it was a pleasure to meet them. Thus, the carriage continued its journey. Tang Yuri thought he was very brave to know that his great-grandfather was one of the 3 elders and might be safe for the next 4 years. Yeonmyeong told her to get to the point and stop hinting. He asked if she thought it was his responsibility. She continued, saying she was surprised by the rule changes but wasn't looking for anyone to blame. Tang Aijin said that, whatever happened, they were now a team. However, the other boy wanted to keep arguing. Yeonmyeong, observing his expression, recognized it as the face of someone who had caused trouble since childhood. He just sighed and listened as the others argued among themselves. He thought that others might have let them go, but it didn't happen. Even he had to prepare a lot to get there. He thought that if that guy caused more trouble, he couldn't just let it slide. He also complained about the sudden stop of the carriage. It was noted that Instructor Jiggle was no longer there among them. He found it odd since the instructor had been right in front of them at the beginning of the discussion, and then suddenly disappeared. Tang Mirio thought that if they got lost in the formation, they might be stuck there. He was also worried about what they should do to get out. Yeonmyeong was certain that if they stayed there, no one would come to rescue them. They didn't understand why he was so calm. They should be panicking inside the phantom capsule formation. Jiggle knew that without launchers, there would be no escape, thinking the Tang family elders were so stingy. The elder had told him that if he eliminated number 28, the support for the general family would double. Hence, they couldn't ignore such a good offer. If the competition were unfair, it would only harm the Tang Sichuan family. The Jiggle family had only to gain. He was startled by a strange noise coming from the formation. It was a crack that opened like a curtain. Chang Xun was extremely frightened to see his formation broken. Yeonmyeong called out to the instructor and asked what would happen if he left them behind. He said their steps didn't match because they were still inexperienced, so please be more careful. However, he looked at that boy with suspicion, knowing there was no flaw in the formation. The rest of the group gathered around him, asking how he managed to cut through the formation. Mirio said it wasn't the right time to worry about that sort of thing. They were lucky to have found Instructor Jiggle, so they should carefully follow him and avoid causing more trouble. However, he had disappeared again. But by now, they understood what he was doing. Jiggle had to flee within his own formation because that boy was the type who couldn't be fooled by simple tricks. He was surprised that a 12-year-old could demonstrate such a strong spirit. Seeing a light, he thought he had found the exit leading to the training fields, moving quickly to leave them behind. Now he was in another place, on the ground, feeling calm because he thought he had left them all behind. He was confident that no method he used could bring them there. Hearing his name spoken by a supervisor, he realized nothing good could come of this. However, the official supervisor of Group 7, Tang Wonjin, seeing him on the ground, asked if he was okay. He quickly asked about the participants of Group 7 and where they were, and what had happened to them. Jiggle thought he should remain calm, as he was prepared for that type of questioning. He said it seemed that Group 7 wouldn't participate in the competition. He had waited a long time, but they hadn't shown up. He thought they might have been attacked by bandits or wild animals. He explained that, unfortunately, accidents happen without warning. It looked like they would have to proceed without the group. He had barely finished saying those words when he noticed his formation breaking again. This also caught the supervisor's attention. Jiggle could barely look back. He couldn't believe what might happen. Running and feigning surprise, he told the supervisor to let him check first what was happening. His formation was breaking, and he hadn't had time to escape. How could the supreme formation of the Jiggle family, the 7-locked Ghost Dome formation, be broken so easily? Yeonmyeong had only a short blade when he broke that formation. Now, Jiggle would have to provide serious explanations to the team's supervisor. Yeonmyeong, with a strange smile and an unusual voice, greeted him, saying he had been busy. The group members were impressed by his skill. It was incredible. He had broken the formation with a short sword. How was that possible? He explained that he hadn't broken the formation, just created a breach. The supervisor asked if they were Group 7 participants. They confirmed and asked who he was, noting the Tang family crest on his hood. The supervisor said he had been worried they might have been attacked, as Instructor Jiggle had suggested. Looking at the one responsible for their absence, he said it seemed they were lost, but thanks to their marking the formation's entrance, they managed to find them easily. He didn't want to report him immediately, as he knew Jiggle was under the orders of the Tang family. For now, he would let it pass since it was only a suspicion. But after the competition, if it was revealed that Jiggle had collaborated with the elders, he would completely eradicate the Jiggle clan. Jiggle apologized for showing such an error, and said he would check the broken formation. The supervisor mentioned there had been a misunderstanding, but they were fine, and he welcomed them, apologizing for the failure in Group 7's training. He introduced himself, saying it was a pleasure to meet them. He was Tang Wonjin, a member of the Bangui Brigade, responsible for their training during the competition period. Tang Mirio was concerned, as he had heard that brigade had disappeared years ago. However, the Bangui Brigade was as powerful as a great leader, one of the most formidable elite forces of the Tang family. Mirio knew that the previous clan leader was Yeomyang's mother, the Poison Phoenix. Yeomyang asked him why he wasn't with the Tang family. It was said that years ago, they fought a desperate battle to protect their master. The young clan leader, the Poison Phoenix, had battled the Celestial Glow Demon Lord, and they were disastrously defeated. The instructor also said that, for failing to protect their masters, they were seen as nothing more than sinners. He said the introductions ended there and told them to listen carefully as he explained the competition rules. The first year of the competition was a period for independent practice. They could train as they saw fit and receive scriptures. Tang Yuri wanted to know if the Tang family's legendary technique of the 10,000 celestial flower rains lost during the battle. However, he explained that the 10,000 flower rains were granted only to whoever became the young clan leader, though the technique was incomplete. Yeomyang knew that this technique dealt with countless hidden weapons like a storm. It would be similar to a sword control technique. Perhaps he could try to imitate it to some degree. The supervisor also said they would receive the essence of the 10,000 celestial flower rains from the elders, one by one. He only wondered if they could handle it. He mentioned that from that moment on, they would exclusively focus on training, either together or individually. Tang Yuri had more questions and wanted to know where they would be staying, and where they could sleep. He replied that it would be in the forest unless she thought they would be training while studying from comfortable beds. He said comfort wouldn't make them stronger at their current level. Adapting to extreme environments was the priority. They were told to start practicing based on their own judgments. Yeomyang commented that it was fine to sleep in a comfortable bed, but he thought it was unnecessary to adapt to the forest environment. The supervisor wasn't too pleased with what he said, but if that child was the one who broke the barrier, he could test his skills. His teammates didn't appreciate what he had done. They thought they might get into trouble because of it. The supervisor said it was fine. If he passed the test, he could stay in the mansion within the formation. However, if he failed, he better be prepared, and he said this only to participant 28. The team members would surround him with spears and hidden weapons. He just had to block or dodge them within 5 steps. They would only start once his eyes were covered. After that, they spread out over almost the entire territory, aiming to strike the boy with his eyes blindfolded. Tang Mirio thought it was all impossible since no one was moving. He thought they might be increasing the pressure over time on purpose. After a few moments, they began to move, throwing their weapons in all directions, trying to confuse him. However, he was simply counting the number of weapons passing near him. He thought 147 was an exaggeration. He just unsheathed his sword and easily dodged all of them. This feat highlighted not only his technique but also his principles. As well as weight, speed, and adaptability, he dodged the weapons effortlessly. The others were shocked by his skill. The supervisor noticed that he was not only deflecting the weapons but also drawing them in. After neutralizing the threat, he removed his blindfold, asking if he had passed the test. The supervisor, after observing the entire trajectory of the weapons and how he disarmed them, even when called, he took a moment to come to his senses. He then said that the result was the result. He concluded by saying that he had passed and could go to the mansion to rest. He thought he had just seen a monster appear. Some thought he truly deserved it, while others felt it was unfair since they were a team and everyone should enjoy the comfort. However, he didn't seem to be agreeing with them. He opened a bright smile and began to laugh, saying that in the mansion, they should offer a variety of different meals. His new companions and part of his team were not at all pleased. The supervisor was pleased that the other team members hadn't lost their motivation. He thought that child could be the chosen one. Yeomyang told his team that the certificate now includes meat in every meal. In the dark forest, some wolves were feeding on prey they had hunted. However, something seemed strange about that prey. It didn't take long before they began to feel side effects. They were collapsing to the ground until none were left standing. After that, the 3 who were meant to survive in the forest jumped on the wolves. They were impressed by Aijin's skills in producing poison. They were truly interesting. Thanks to her technique, they would have a meal. Tang Yuri drooled at the thought of eating the meat, while the other 2 conversed. About 4 months had passed since the first day they arrived there. They had been on the run. The first thing they encountered was a bear. They couldn't even find prey and had to eat roots, and all of them shed tears when they finally managed to hunt. It was hard, but somehow they found shelter. They thought Yeomyang was probably living comfortably at that moment. Mirio didn't even want to hear his name mentioned, though Aijin was curious. Mirio said he was probably just wandering around alone. Besides, it was only a matter of time before they saw that guy at the mansion. He'd get what he deserved. Considering the performance he showed before, Aijin thought if he kept training, he could become much stronger. However, Mirio noticed something was missing. When she looked, the meat was already gone. The 2 looked angrily at Tang Yuri. She was lying down, feeling sick from having eaten all the meat herself. When she saw they were upset, she asked them to move aside as they were blocking the starlight. In the mountains of Gangnong, In the ghost capsule of the 7 braids, it was night, and he was still training. Yeonmyang rested when he needed to, but when it came to training, he always went hard. He was taking advantage of the warriors' help and training intensely with them. As a trained adult, he didn't need to go easy on any of them. With his technical moves he had discovered after awakening from his previous life, not even weapons could hold him back. Trained warriors couldn't predict his movements or block his attacks. At a certain point in the training, he decided it was time to test his new technique. Holding some ring-like shurikens, he was sure he could manage. The warriors prepared themselves, waiting for his calculated attack. Even then, they couldn't follow his movements or the weapons he launched into the air. It seemed too random, yet he was hitting them one by one each time. When they realized they were shurikens, it seemed a bit too late. They were too fast to be seen. He made them spin rapidly to achieve the frenzied spinning dance. The supervisor couldn't believe he had neutralized trained members in an instant. Additionally, he controlled the power of a wide attack just to graze everyone's skin. Curious to know if that technique was something he had created, he asked, and he answered affirmatively. Holding one of the shurikens, he said it would be hard to escape if one got caught. It was an impressive technique. He wanted to know what name he had given that technique. The young man said he called it the frenzied spinning dance. He understood, and asked if using it consumed much internal energy, and wanted to know how he was managing that, because he had once asked a warrior for a manual on ocular techniques. The techniques, sky-piercing eyes, and flowing current eyes, but he recommended sky-piercing eyes. Yeonmyang reported that he had mastered the flowing current eyes, leaving his supervisor quite astonished. Mastering the flowing current eyes was one of the oldest ocular techniques of the Tang family. He didn't know how Yeonmyang had done it. The young man explained that, although the essence was missing, he realized that the technique was part of the ascendant martial arts. Using the flowing current eyes to see weapon trajectories, he could throw them with precision. By then, the supervisor could hear anything. Nothing could surprise him about that boy anymore. He told him that in 2 months, the other children of the team would be there, and they would go through the same test under the same conditions. He mentioned that they had already proven they had the skills for the test but said they would return prepared. He found that pleasant to hear. He was excited to see how strong those friends had become. The supervisor noticed he was concerned. However, he realized the others were using him as a form of training, but he thought it wouldn't matter. Yeonmyang, looking at the sky, thought about destiny. In his past life, his only connection was with his master, the Sword Phantom. However, despite origins and actions, connections were being formed. It could be considered part of a normal life. For some reason, he wanted to see them soon. On the first day of training, they were mere novices, but now they had reached a completely different level of power. Just thinking about meeting him again, they were truly excited. They even considered splitting his head in half. You could see in their eyes and faces that they liked the thought of that possibility. The person supervising their training noticed how motivated they were to train their aim. He also couldn't understand what was going on with them. At the castle, they were shouting for him, even thinking he had fled. It would be a shame because they wanted to crush his head. Mirio was saying that she thought Tang Aijin was very quiet since early on, so she turned to look at him. Then she saw that Yeonmyang had his arm around Aijin's neck, who was completely unresponsive. Laughing, he said he had hidden to surprise them all. He even found their plans amusing. Still with his arm around Aijin's neck, as if they were embracing, he wanted them to repeat themselves, as he found it quite cute. He asked what the rest of the group was doing, as they were just standing there, looking at him. Since they had been talking about crushing his head and showing the results of half a year of training, he was curious. He also asked if he should attack first. They said no need, as it was just a joke. They wondered how they hadn't seen him, nor noticed his presence. Living in the forest sharpened their senses, but not enough. Now he was hugging Aijin and Yuri, while Mirio thought about the difference between them, and what he had done during that time. Moreover, he had gotten taller, and his face. But suddenly she came to her senses and blushed a little. She thought it was just because she had been around animals. Yeonmyang told her not to be too discouraged. Even from her perspective, she had become incomparably stronger. She couldn't see it only because it seemed less interesting, but he was around. They all agreed that some things never changed. A meeting was taking place, and if it was indeed Jianggu, they said it had been 6 months, yet it was hard to see his face. However, he asked them to get straight to the point and inquired if there was anyone outstanding in the group. Participant number 2 was notable. He showed an impressive growth rate compared to the others. More than a desire to become stronger or survive, he seemed to burn with intense hostility towards someone. However, another person said that if they were discussing frontrunners, they couldn't overlook participant number 10. He had passed the warrior's test in just 1 month, and participants 2 and 10 certainly stood out the most. Yet, they thought that after facing number 28, they seemed quite ordinary. They couldn't forget how surprising it was that he escaped in such an extreme way. They observed his training later and were completely shocked, as he showed skills that even masters couldn't perform. However, recruiting him at that moment was very risky. It seemed he had noticed their manipulations. Jianga was called out, as he seemed very concerned about something. They wanted to know what it was. Putting on a happy face, he said his group had no one remarkable, but he thought it was better to change the subject. However, they needed a puppet they could control. He thought about recruiting number 2 and introducing him to his niece. He had heard that number 2 kept his face covered due to a facial injury. It shouldn't be hard to sway such a child's heart. If they helped him win the competition and become the clan's young leader, and then involved him with his niece, Jiga would officially become the Tang family's external family. This would grant authority to intervene in their affairs. It would increase the Tang family's influence and secure their interests. Eventually, they would merge the family. That's why they supported the Tang family competition. They thought they had concluded the meeting appropriately, so they could end it there. They noted that 28 was too valuable to lose. If he survived the competition, they would try to steer him toward revenge, adopting him as a son and offering him the position of Jigal clan leader. Meanwhile, they kept training, and their accuracy was getting better. Tang Mirio thought that, by living in the mansion, they had intensified their training. Although it had doubled, nothing compared to the comfort of a good night's sleep. Aijin and Yomyang had gone to the lab. It was also said that Aijin had gone against his will. When Mirio heard he was swearing revenge, she found it admirable, as he was the best at making poison. In the lab, he boasted that he had poured his whole soul into making that poison. He also said it couldn't be ignored and found it strange when Yomyang took the bowl of poison in his hands and started drinking it all in one gulp. He wondered if he was crazy for drinking such a large dose of poison. Someone was shaking him, urging him to spit it out already. Yomyang, with a mouthful of poison and puffed cheeks, stood still, watching the odd reaction Aijin was having as he asked if the poison was taking effect. Then he decided he would spit out the poison and did so right onto his face, wondering why he kept shaking him. After a while, he saw that it had almost no effect. Smiling, he asked if this poison was really meant to be so weak. Aijin, very frightened, asked what he was talking about. That was a poison strong enough to melt even internal organs. But he was puzzled to see the young man before him still doing fine. And more than fine, he was even smiling and, with a strange look, told him that perhaps it was because his poison was mediocre. Hearing the shouts coming from the lab, the girls realized that, for some reason, it wasn't giving the expected result. Tang Aijin was furious, as he was drinking his poison as if it were just any alcoholic drink. After drinking, he showed the empty bowl and said it didn't affect him at all, asking if he didn't have anything else to offer. He was frustrated as nothing was working. He even thought he might be immune to all poisons. However, it was different from being immune to all poisons. It was the core technique of the Tang family, the madness of poison refinement. It would be strange if someone who worked with poisons could be poisoned. They were known as masters of poison. As expected, the poisons that entered his body were transformed into internal energy and accumulated within him. Thus, it was a state that could only be reached through deep realization. The same didn't apply to weak poisons, as they hardly increased internal energy. He always needed stronger poisons. There would be many things to resolve before living a normal life, as he desired, and he could eliminate the elders if he wanted. If the Black Death Alliance or the Celestial Radiance Demon Lord invaded, he couldn't guarantee the outcome. However, he held no grudge against the Black Death Alliance, but since they divided Sichuan, they couldn't be ignored. The leader of the Black Death Alliance was known as a genius of the era, having destroyed 3 of the 9 factions. If he were what he once was, he could face him easily, but he wasn't at that level yet. He knew that to live as a human. He thought that if Aijin could make a poison several times stronger than the one he just took. He even set aside his thoughts when he heard him say he could make the 10 poisons of the Tang family, and got curious. Angry, he said that despite claiming to be the blood of the clan's former leader, he actually knew nothing about the 10 poisons. From the first poison to the 10th, and the 10th was so potent that even transcendent-level masters were affected. They were managed and divided among the elders, as even transcendent-level masters couldn't handle them. Smiling and putting his hand on his chin, he thought that was a poison worthy of desire. He asked his colleague if he really didn't know how to make the 10th poison, but he replied, "How could anyone make the 10th poison?" Yomyang said it was a shame, as the poisons offered to him didn't even give a feeling of fullness. Upset, he told him that, in any case, there was such a dangerous poison that its use was generally forbidden. Elsewhere, Youngryang was being held by the neck by a young man. He questioned her, asking what she had done to him. After that, he started coughing heavily. Apparently, he was under the effect of something very strong, considering she was very skilled with poisons. She looked at him with a superior air and told him to repeat what was wrong with her face. At that moment, his side effects worsened dramatically. It seemed like he was burning from the inside out, giving the impression that he could explode at any moment. It didn't take long, and the effects of the poison applied to him started to show as he began to disintegrate. As the effects took hold, his body fell to the ground, turning to ash and breaking into several pieces. She was very pleased, as the poison given by her grandfather was very potent. It was one of the 10 poisons. Placing her hand on her disfigured side of her face, she simply smiled with a sinister look. She remembered the pain she felt that day. It was unforgettable, and that anger and pain would remain suppressed. And she would make sure to torment Yomyang a lot in this poison game. Time passed quickly, but another half-year had gone by, making it a full year since he started training. He had already refined his martial arts and condensed his weaknesses, but the true challenge would begin now. They would have to choose a team leader. That news left the girls on the team surprised. The supervisor announced that yes, it was now time to appoint a temporary leader. Until the 3rd year, they would elect a team leader, and each team's leader would represent them in a life-or-death match. Among the participants, the most outstanding would become the leader. However, not all participants would go to the poison match. The girls knew that, based on achievements, obviously. The chosen one would be number 28, Tang Yomyang, and they promptly appointed him as the leader of Team 7. Tang Jiahai said that he wouldn't just be a leader in practice but also one of the main candidates. The supervisor reminded them that, for now, he would only be a temporary team leader, so no one objected. He asked if number 28 understood and requested that he step forward. Opening a box, he showed something and wanted him to take it. He explained that it was the Tang family elixir, called the Celestial Heart Pill. The Celestial Heart Pill was an elixir made from the root of a 100-year-old ginseng. It would significantly boost internal energy. All 3 others on the team questioned why they would give such a precious thing to Yomyang. The supervisor clarified that it was a privilege granted to the person who would become the temporary team leader in the Tang clan. However, the supervisor had high expectations, especially for Tang Yomyang. Yet the boy wanted to know if there was anything more than that pill, and since there wasn't, he didn't want the pill. He didn't need an elixir, he wanted something else. The supervisor thought it was unlikely anyone would refuse an elixir unless it didn't increase their energy. His quick response was to ask for a potent poison, the strongest among them. He wanted the 10 poisons of the Tang family. Some time later he returned, and the group members wanted to know where the elixir was. There were only weapons there. He explained that he had wanted the 10 poisons of the Tang family, but since he couldn't get them, he took those weapons instead. Tang Mirio quickly charged at him to punch him in the face. She thought he should have brought the elixir, but there was controversy. Some thought they should respect his decision. Aijin said with satisfaction that the elders would be very pleased they hadn't used the Celestial Heart Pill. Yomyang had something to say, that he hadn't returned it. Hours earlier, in the weapon storage, the supervisor was handing him what he had requested and asked if that was enough. He mentioned that he was indeed disappointed it wasn't the potent poison he had asked for, but if it was the only thing he could get, he'd have to accept it. The supervisor was saddened by not obtaining the poison, as everyone else preferred the elixir. He said he had a question to ask and asked the supervisor what he planned to do with the pill. He explained that it should be returned to the Hall of the Medicine King, and asked if he had changed his mind. However, that wasn't the case. He had simply thought of an interesting idea. Possibly if the team members joined forces to defeat the temporary team leader. Since they had agreed to elect him as leader, they should be rewarded with the Celestial Heart Pill. The supervisor thought it was a good idea. It should be enough as a good incentive, like an investment in the future of the Tang clan. He told them they were free to challenge him at any time. The deadline was before the start of the Goo Poison match. As soon as he finished speaking, the girls were the first to want to challenge him. However, he wasn't willing to make it easy for them. He thought that when he became the clan's young leader, everyone would receive a pill. He was constantly called for challenges, and they kept challenging him through various seasons, and a lot of time passed. Tang Aijin kept being defeated every time he asked for a confrontation. Even when losing, he always sought training to improve. Yomyang asked if he knew how many times he had already lost, and said it was probably 173 times. Mirio thought he never got tired. There wasn't even a disruption in his breathing. Tang Yuri had already given up. However, currently, regardless of the competition, she only went to see Yomyang's face. Her teammate agreed, saying it was something very entertaining to watch. Offering his hand, he asked if Aijin accepted defeat, as he was already about to take the position of the clan's young leader. He stated that, despite not knowing any of the other teams, he couldn't imagine himself losing. He also wanted to know if he wouldn't ignore them after becoming a young master. The supervisor thought everyone had grown tremendously compared to the past year. He also reminded them that now that Yomyang was the team leader, he would need to participate in the Goo Poison match the next day. He requested that he make the final preparations. 3 years had passed since they began training for the competition, and other teams had been disqualified or even killed. Compared to them, all team members were doing well. Besides achieving growth comparable to the Banhui Brigade, they had reason to be proud. He mentioned that he had talked about the goo poison match several times, but he would remind him once more. Until then, using poison in training had been prohibited, but in the goo poison match, the use of extreme poisons was allowed. He continued, saying that from the goo poison onward, it was a competition where participants used their most lethal techniques and tactics. He was given the poison he had requested. Aijin mentioned that anyone else would be killed with just one drop and asked him to remember that a single drop could be deadly. He was very concerned, but he asked him to promise he would win, and he kept jokingly trying to land a punch on his face, until Yomyang grabbed his hand and pressed his face against it. With a slight bruise on his nose, he said he promised. He also said the only ones who could hurt him until the end of the competition were them. Under the gaze of the three, he left through a connection to the competition site created for him to pass. Elsewhere, someone was very pleased because the day of the competition had arrived. Youngryang held the poison vial and said that her luck with the 10 poisons she would prepare was now a new ally. She remembered when a formation was created just so someone from the Jeagle clan could speak with her, and she wanted to know how they could help. She said she was aware that the goo poison match arena was created with their family's formation, and they could manipulate the formation to move it to an advantageous position. Since she wasn't naive, she knew it would come at a cost and asked what the reason was, what they would want in return. Jeagle replied that, frankly, the clan was in a very bad state. To return to its era of glory, he would like to join forces with the Tang clan. They were saying they wanted to use her as a puppet to interfere in the Tang clan's affairs and asked if she simply didn't want it. Jeagle said that's why he was there. Building a friendship was just a matter of saying what she wanted. She had endured those 3 years just for that day. She would kill him and take back the life she lost. Now, she could hardly wait to see him again, as she was the leader of Team 1. In Team 2, Tang Jianzhou was the team leader. After defeating someone, he said he expected more from the Tang clan militia, but they were just all talk. That's the leader of Team 3, Tang Grukran. Tang Hiran was the leader of Team 4, Tang Jiao led Team 5, Tang Myungso led Team 6. Finally, last but not least, Team 7 was led by Tang Yomyang. He thought it was a beautiful day to be a winner. From the goo poison match, the competition began. He had spent 3 years merely blending in. Finally, he had arrived at the competition site. He looked at the place where the goo poison match would take place, and saw that everything was gigantic. Unaware that he was being spied on by Jeagle, he thought it would take a while to find someone. Jeagle was already expecting his team to be chosen. He looked at him, but knew his potential was being wasted. But the clan had already made a choice, and he had to accept that he would have to eliminate him as soon as possible to prevent him from becoming a variable. Unexpectedly, he looked in Jeagle's direction, who felt that their gazes had met, but thought it was impossible that he had spotted him through so many layers of formation. After that, he only heard the sound of the blade, and that formation was broken with just Yomyang's short blade. He felt an unsettling gaze and wondered if it could be the Jeagle clan. He remembered what the supervisor had said, in the goo poison match, no one but the participants should interfere. However, he had heard that clan had been meddling since the beginning of the competition. He thought they might interfere even in the competition, though he didn't know what they were planning. They could try if they wanted. He could interrogate them after the poison match ended. Elsewhere, someone was trembling with heavy breathing. They couldn't believe that even hidden through several layers of formation, if they hadn't quickly removed the vision of the formation world, they would have gone blind. He cut through the formation space, reaching its very essence. He had never seen a swordsman of that level in his life. He knew they had made a mistake. That boy wasn't someone he could face. If he sensed their intentions, he would surely seek revenge. On the other hand, someone was wounded, sighing as they emerged from the forest. They cried out, shouting that they didn't know how they had ended up there, as they didn't want to be disintegrated. She was seeking a decent result to join the clan's forces and help her poor parents. That's why she ended up like this. She never wanted the position of young clan leader, and planned to surrender and leave on her own. But then that guy suddenly appeared and said it was great that everyone was in the same place. And he began to strike everyone at once. Surrender was no longer an option, as that person's goal was simply to exterminate them. It didn't matter who he met anymore. She would just surrender, thinking the other team leaders might still be alive. She was about to step down, but if he returned as the young clan leader, she murmured those words and felt a presence. The guy who had struck others and injured her was there, smiling, saying she thought too highly of herself. He praised her, saying that at least her feet seemed quick, but it wasn't enough, as she was pathetically caught in terms of internal energy. Showing his trophies to her, he said she was no different from the others. Desperately, she shouted, asking why he was going so far, that he didn't need to do all this. They were all family. However, that didn't matter to him. He never thought of himself as part of the Tang family clan of Sichuan. And in that moment, as she stood there scared, he simply took her life. Elsewhere, Yomyang was leaping from tree to tree. He seemed to be searching for a place to stay. After looking around, he found a cave, and it was exactly what he needed, as there were no traces of human presence. Entering the cave, he thought there was nothing special about it, as nothing alerted his senses. He wanted to ascend quickly to the transcendent level. He sat in a meditative position, and by then his body had matured, so there shouldn't be any side effects. There were two conditions for reaching that level: achieving enlightenment, and having enough internal energy to open the poison meridians. With his past life experiences, he had already achieved enlightenment. His internal energy had also increased greatly thanks to the poison created by Aijin. Therefore, all conditions were already met. He would break through the barriers he placed on the poison meridians and his meridians, unleashing the accumulated poison refinement madness. The internal energy would be released with incredible force. Normally, martial artists experience tremendous pain. The joints break and reconstruct countless times during the process, literally creating a new body. Since he had experienced this in his previous life, the second time wasn't as painful. As he did this, everything around him lit up. It was smart of him to regularly cleanse his meridians, if impurities had remained during the ascension process. He couldn't go into battle wearing clothes that smelled bad. It was only the beginning, but it wasn't bad. He thought he should test his body outside, since maintaining a clean and healthy body had been a priority since before the match. However, few physical changes were noticed. However, his power was now efficient. He tested his power by unleashing it on a mountain rock, and indeed, the internal energy's efficiency wasn't bad. He thought he should start moving. The young man pursuing others, Tang-gukren, was standing on a tree trunk and questioned the person below. That was another person who was also being hunted. He asked why, after training so much, he was still so weak. Why, out of all the people he could encounter in the match, did it have to be that guy, an orphan raised as the Grand Elder's grandson? The Grand Elder Tang-gukren's favorite student, and as the rumors said, he was incredibly strong. He failed when he thought he had a chance if he attacked first but couldn't even touch his collar, and ended up like this. Looking at the guy, he knew it was the end. A thought invaded his mind, but he didn't know why he was hunting that guy at that moment. Tang Yomyang in fact thought that if he didn't encounter him, his mind would feel relieved. Tang-gukren, seeing his opponent smiling, asked why he was smiling in that situation and if he had any hidden tricks. He replied that there was no way. He was just thinking of someone scarier than him. Those words sounded like insults. He said he should become even scarier and asked if he wanted him to share something. "I'm actually here as a spy for the Black Death Alliance." The young man on the ground, with several injuries, couldn't believe he was saying something of that magnitude to him. Since he now knew his identity, he couldn't let him live. He said he already wanted to die anyway, so he would tell him his name. He said he was from the clan of the Great Silent Black Sword. After saying that, he prepared to provide his exit. Kneeling on the ground, the young man opened his eyes to see what was happening. The one who would take his life couldn't even move. Tang Yomyang said he had sensed a presence, and went to see what it was, only to end up seeing a familiar face. Looking at the young man on the ground, he asked if he, Jianjil, also wanted to know if he had recovered since the last time they fought. The young man couldn't recognize him, doubt in his eyes. He asked him who he was. The story of how he had become a spy years ago was being told to the young man, intended to make him a spy in the Tang clan. With his talents, by pretending to be an orphan, he would attract someone's attention to adopt him, and within a few years, weakening their ranks by eliminating other candidates who came later, and if he returned after completing the mission, the whole clan would recognize him. Now, he lay on the ground, feeling like his intestines were dissolving. Yomyang, looking at Jianjil, wondered if this guy was the one who had done all this to him while he lay there in severe pain. Tang Jianjil asked if he was that Tang Yomyang, who confirmed that he was indeed. He wondered if he needed to press his face into the ground again for him to believe, but it wasn't necessary. He realized it was him. Struggling, the young man on the ground asked if he had confessed to being a spy, and it was affirmed that he had. He was from the Black Sword sect, and upon hearing that, he began to think about the presence he had sensed. He would capture him first, making a hand signal and managing to remove the needle he had thrown at him from the beginning. Jianjil was startled, seeing that now he was even using a poison needle. He also wanted to know what kind of poison would cause a reaction like that from such a small needle. His question was ignored, and he asked if he had seen other participants. He said yes, but he asked if he should detoxify the young man first. Detoxifying wasn't the goal. He didn't want the information. After all, if he was from a dark clan like the Black Death Alliance, his intentions were clear, so there was no need. Just from hearing him, it was noticeable he had changed a lot. Tang Jianjil was worried about the conflict he had, but it seemed he no longer cared. However, if that were the case, as he spoke, the young man lying on the ground showed some reaction, trying to get up. Tang Jianjil bowed respectfully and apologized, deeply regretting that time. Yomyang simply told him to forget about it. He didn't care about the past, so he could let it go. Jianzhou said he knew it wouldn't resolve the conflicts of the past, but he felt the need to apologize sincerely. He reaffirmed that he didn't need to worry about those things. Jianzhou suddenly widened his eyes and, fearing for Yomyang's life, warned him of the danger approaching. However, he had already sensed that presence. The young man thought that since he was going to die anyway, he should at least take the two of them with him. He started striking the air, thinking he was hitting someone, saying he would at least take him down. Jianzhou shouted, thinking Yomyang had been struck. The opponent thought the same for a few moments, until he realized it was just an illusion. He could sense his presence, but he was mistaken. Yomyang said it was customary to have the habit of sparing a dying man. However, if he insisted on attacking him, he would destroy him without leaving a trace. Placing a hand on his shoulder, he said he thought it would be better not to have a body to care for afterward. With just a hand on his shoulder, the young man fainted. Now the three of them were there, in the middle of that forest. It was impressive that even as a spy, he was one of the main candidates to win the competition. If the last technique had been the poisonous martial art of the silent sword of the great darkness, casually performing the timid sword technique that used two swords with lightning agility, Yomyang interrupted Tang Jianzhou's thoughts, as now it was just the two of them there. He said that if allowed, he would simply surrender. However, he didn't know the way out. Yomyang opened a passage for him and told him to go, as there was no need for farewells. Seeing that he could also create formations, he thanked him for sparing his life. He watched as he left. He even wished him good luck. At the headquarters of the Black Moon Sword sect, a spiritual orb allowed sensing life and death even from afar. That orb had been implanted in the youngest, meaning he had died. He was a child born from a relationship with a servant, but he had more talent than any of the other siblings. After discovering this, the wife feared he would take the heir's place and tried to kill him more than a dozen times. Therefore, he lived as a spy in the Tang clan, and he regretted not doing more as a father. At the very least, he could avenge his death. He ordered all disciples to prepare for the journey to Mount Gangnong. The long-awaited time to crush the Tang clan was approaching. He asked to contact the other sects. From that day on, no one with the Tang surname would return alive from Mount Gangnong. The key was strange. They traveled day and night, and there was no one, not even a trace of spiritual presence. If the formation had been manipulated to prevent their advance, the remaining survivors should be with the Jigo clan. He knew they planned to increase their influence within the Tang clan, aiming for the long term. He thought these people were predictable. To them, those ambitious plans would come at a great cost. However, Jigo constantly felt like he was being watched. Meanwhile, Yomyang lay in the grass, contemplating the sky. He wished he could show it all to his mother. He wondered how she was doing. He quickly fell asleep. Approaching him, Youngrian had long been seeking revenge. Yet, she only saw a stranger on the ground. She didn't know who this guy was. She had asked to find the last survivor or Tang Yomyang in a vulnerable moment. He didn't look like Tang Gukren. Finally, as she got closer, she noticed he was handsome. Observing him a little more, she thought he might be Jigo clan member Chang Xin's nephew. He looked somewhat like that. Placing something in her mouth, she thought it was a shame what would happen to his face. But what could she do, anyway? Then she released one of her potent poisons. With the person asleep, she told him not to underestimate himself so much. After all, the competition would end when only one remained. With his eyes closed, he told her he wasn't sure if she was ready, but still placed his hand on her neck. Rising from the ground and forcing her to her knees, he asked if she was receiving help from the Jigo clan. He said that while others were killing each other, she was probably in a safe place, and her plan was to attack the last vulnerable person. Squeezing a bit more, he asked what the deal was between them. She wondered how he knew she was coming. Firmly, he told her that if she wanted to keep living, she should answer without hiding anything. He asked if she wouldn't like to breathe, yet she thought that if only she hadn't dropped the drug out of fear. As he held her, he thought he might know her from somewhere. He asked if she was Tang Yangriang. He continued, saying that after all the trouble she caused, she hadn't changed a bit. He asked if he should ruin her entire face this time. Meanwhile, Jigal observed the scene and thought his plan had been discovered. Number 28 cut the formation, impairing his vision, although he managed to orchestrate the elimination of all except number 2. Everything had been going well until number 10 quickly eliminated the competitors. However, everything changed when he encountered number 28. If numbers 2 and 10, whose abilities were similar, had fought, it might be uncertain. He wondered if number 2 had any chance of beating 28. Considering how quickly number 10 disposed of his opponents, it seemed unlikely. He kept thinking that if number 28 won, all his plans would be wasted. He didn't know what to do. There was something within the formation that caught his attention. He sensed a large number of energies. The enemy had already reached the base of the mountain. However, the Changjin sect leader thought it was overkill to use their full force against the Tang clan's rookies. He noted that they were only 2 disciples among 200, plus the extra strength from the other sex. The number had reached 300 that day. However, he was already aware that he would face the Tang clan. As for strength, it might be excessive, yet since the mountain was sect territory, Gandong's influence was incomparable to the Tang clan's crumbling state. He said he failed, but he was someone he loved. They didn't want to talk further, as they would leave immediately, unaware that they were under Jegal clan surveillance. Observing the sect leader, Ma Kinhu, unless he had been involved in the competition, he shouldn't have been able to find that place. There might be a spy. Regardless, he needed to report to the Bangui Brigade for proper action. However, if he could use them to eliminate number 28, his plans would remain hidden from the Tang clan. He grinned maliciously, as now his mistakes could easily be covered up. In another scene, the girl with her face covered thought she hadn't recognized that individual even though he was right in front of her. Now she was waiting for at least an opening. He wanted to know what was on her blade, if it was poison, as he had never seen such a bright red poison before. She thought he was distracted. Now was her chance. Throwing the liquid still in her hand toward him, she wanted to bring about his end. He grabbed her hand and, interested in what was there, asked her. She tried to answer, making failed attempts. He asked if it was poison, looking at the vial. Judging by the color, it seemed to be the same poison that was on the blade. Before, he had held her with her arm raised, but now he threw her to her knees and asked if she wasn't going to say anything. He squeezed her cheeks until her mouth opened and said that if she didn't speak, they could go back a bit in time. He was about to put the poison in her mouth. She begged him to let her go, saying she would talk if he did. But he thought it was better to put the poison in her mouth so she could taste it, and tell him what poison it was. It was one of the 10 poisons of the Tang clan, called the Fire Dragon Poison, one of the most powerful. This piqued his interest, as the Tang family's 10 poisons should not be used irresponsibly. He kept thinking that if it was really the poison, it would be his elixir, and if he had let her consume it, it would have been a waste, like casting pearls before swine. She said she had already agreed to surrender and asked him to let her go. She even offered to help fight the other participants. He said he hadn't heard her full answer yet, and wanted to know if she was cooperating with the Jegal clan. He asked her to tell him the promises they had made to her. If she didn't answer, she would swallow all of the fire dragon poison. She said it was a marriage proposal, a marital alliance on the condition of merging the clans. He had proposed a marriage to the future young leader of the clan. Jegal leadership must have been planning to maintain their status. She should have eagerly accepted the marriage proposal, something she could only dream of. While taking the rest of the poison, still with his hand on her neck, she asked what he was doing, and he said it was nothing important, just that he knew he wasn't going to share it with her. She thought it was the fire dragon poison, and he drank it. After drinking, he found that the unexpected taste was something like a strawberry flavor. Immediately, he began to radiate, as if his body were possessed by flames. She, still on her knees with his hand around her neck, looked at that scene in disbelief. She said that even the invulnerability body couldn't handle the Tang clan's 10 poisons. She wanted to see him burn until he disappeared. She noticed that his hand on her neck wasn't weakening. Seeing his head catch fire, she thought it was astonishing. He said that suddenly the poison in that vial had a spicy taste. The girl, disappointed, couldn't believe this could be happening. The Tang clan had a legendary state that was said to be different from the invulnerability body, called the Poisoner's Realm. She had heard from her grandfather that such a realm truly existed, but she couldn't believe he was a poisoner. He looked at her and applied enough force to her torso to immobilize her for good. Looking at her, he said that she must have thought he would take his own life with the poison she had given him. He told her he didn't have that light of a temperament. Looking at his hands, he realized that the poison refinement madness energy had changed. He didn't think the so-called plant poisons could be so potent, as if he were mastering the yin and yang martial art. As he left her kneeling but immobilized forever, and said he was thankful because he had gained something valuable. Suddenly, he felt a strange presence, looked at the sky, and noticed it was the middle of the night, yet it seemed like the sun was rising. He realized the formation was constantly shifting. It was being deactivated, as the competition had ended. However, he realized it wasn't that. He felt strange presences appearing en masse, perhaps a total of 200. Or maybe a little more, maybe 300. Considering the number, this was suspicious for the clan. The Jegal clan couldn't have failed to notice such a large group, but if they deliberately allowed them entry into the formation, knowing that he had targets coming his way to practice on was indeed a stroke of luck. In the Gu poison match, survival was only the destiny of one. Jegal was informing the Bangui brigade of the invasion. Upon hearing this, the warrior grew very tense. Changshin noted that there appeared to be a spy among them. They had already identified who they were and the size of their forces. He reported that there were approximately 300 men in the main troop, and that their leader was from the Black Moon Sword clan, Makinhu. Why were those who should be in Sichuan here? How did they find that place hidden by the Seven Lock Ghost formation? However, It wasn't time to think about that. They should hurry to stop them. However, Jiga warned that this was the problem. He asked why the hesitation. He mentioned he had never expected a situation like this. If they entered the formation world where the poison match was taking place, it would become impossible to intervene there. Therefore, they would have no choice but to rely on the young clan members still within the formation. They could only hope they would overcome this crisis. The Black Moon sect leader, upon seeing his youngest on the ground, he was enraged, and the Chanjin sect leader said that, judging by the situation, he was in the right place. He also commented that, based on the injuries, he must have been struck by a needle. With the few signs of struggle around, it seemed he was defeated without resistance. The Black Moon Sword sect leader was furious, as his son hadn't even had the end of a warrior, since the poison held him back. He shouted for everyone to listen, search every corner of the formation, and destroy the Tang clan's rats. He said that surely one of them must have noticed their presence and hidden. If they found them, they were to report it immediately. Among all the people there, none bore the Tang surname. The leader was not perturbed that day. He replied that, yes, unusually, he was displaying his intent to harm. They commented among themselves that the body they had seen earlier could have been the spy they had implanted there, and the only external wounds on that body were needle marks on the neck. They thought that was why the Tang clan was so feared. Regardless of an individual's martial prowess, they aimed for their very life. The master advised the soldier to be cautious of hidden weapons, but he was quickly struck by some. They were under attack. Seeing the disciple fall, he realized it was a poison needle. They shouted it was an ambush, and everyone was to ready their swords. However, they couldn't spot where the attacks were coming from and ordered the assailant not to hide like a coward. The disciples were told not to let their guard down, but it wasn't much help. They were under a shower of needles, with no way to avoid them. Poison needle rains struck the group, leaving no one behind. Yeonmyeong was satisfied, as he used the single palm poison technique. It was amazing how lethal it was. At least it worked well against mere infantry soldiers. Moving his hand, he removed all the needles. He was also impressed with the flow technique, as it didn't require much internal energy to disperse the poison needles. Leaving the area, he thought it was the best combination. He just needed to look for those who went east. Reports indicated that all search teams had been taken down. There were signs of them being hit by something like needles. It seemed they were taken down with the same extreme poison as the first body they saw. They said that, without exception, everyone had been taken down by the same method and wanted to know from the leader what it was. It was reported that the West Lookout had also been annihilated. The Black Moon Sword sect leader, upon hearing that no group had survived, pondered what it could mean. That was all the personnel they had left. However, it had only been an hour since they began their search, and approximately 100 men had already been taken down the same way. He asked the leader if this could be the work of one person. If there were many capable of such acts, the situation would be even worse. It seemed like a master from the Tang clan was facing them. He thought that in this way, they were the ones being hunted. He called Zhang Bangjiu and handed over command to him. He said that as someone using spectral throwing techniques, he would also prepare personally for an ambush. He couldn't lose more disciples and was counting on him. He noticed there was no presence. Everything was eerily silent. He was upset because they were the only ones suffering losses with no gains. It might be better to withdraw and retreat before the damage increased. He said he would leave that place within an hour at most. A while after saying those words, he heard someone questioning him. Looking around, he saw him on a tree branch. Contrary to what he was thinking, he wasn't going to let any of them leave. Gripped by fear, as he couldn't understand why his senses hadn't detected his presence. Thus, he ordered all his soldiers to dodge as quickly as possible, trying to avoid as many casualties as possible. All of a sudden, they were all struck down, and the losses were now enormous. Only the leader remained, and Yeonmyeong questioned him about his position. Although Jung Yeon-sung, the Chanjin sect leader, was on high alert, he also couldn't perceive when he descended from the tree. Looking closely, it was clear that this guy was responsible for the previous massacres. Although he didn't appear to be an old master, he noted that the attack might be a form of void absorption. Even if it was the realm of void absorption, it was something that only a high master who had reached enlightenment could use. However, noticing that he didn't attack again but rather recovered indicated that it was a technique consuming a massive portion of his internal energy. Suddenly, hope filled his eyes, and he managed to smile, thinking that boy was arrogant. He said he had never heard of anyone like him in the Tang clan. Yeonmyeong replied that it didn't matter whether he had heard of him or not. This caused some shock and surprise in the leader. He expressed that a man destined to die didn't even need to know his name, which wiped the confident smile off the sect leader's face. Full of rage, he said that if a young man was in such a hurry to meet his end, he would gladly fulfill that wish. He concentrated to perfect his technique's movements and maximize their effectiveness. Focusing, he controlled his breathing. Finally, he intended to use his technique, believing he could destroy him with just one move. He advanced a few steps closer. The result of his attack was merely blocked. He couldn't comprehend how he had simply evaded a maximum power technique. Yeomyang mocked the leader, asking if that was his maximum power. He'd even give him a bit more time. Perhaps he could try to increase that mediocre power a bit. This event took place long before that competition. After the Spearhead sect, one of the 9 clans, fell to the Black Death Alliance. Zhang Jinbang voluntarily joined the union, where they admired his expertise in personal techniques. They refined his personal techniques so that, by the time he met the syndicate leader on his path, Zhang Yinsong's specialty, his personal technique, shaking the peak, had been transformed. However, the name wasn't satisfactory, so they decided to change it, as it had passed into other hands. The syndicate leader thought it should reach the heavens, so the Black Death Alliance leader granted him the name Heavenly Quake Palm. Today, the technique was conferred by the syndicate leader, yet he was bested by a young man in such a weak battle. Looking at the boy from the Tang clan, he calmly observed his expression. Yeomyang unleashed the fire dragon poison, one of the most lethal poisons that contained the breath of a fire dragon. If someone could control that poison with the madness of the poisonous aura or a sword chi filled with cutting intent, the Changjin sect leader couldn't comprehend such incredible yang energy. He still tried in vain to resist the block on his attack. He couldn't believe the Heavenly Quake Palm had been defeated. However, what was happening was that the leader wasn't strong enough to withstand it, and he ended up petrified in pieces. Yeomyang, seeing the effect of drinking only a little of one of the 10 poisons, found it useful. The fiery poisonous chi included heat. It should, therefore, be called fire poison strength. He wondered who would be next to burn to death. Seeing as he had no intention of letting any of them leave alive, it would be more convenient if they were all annihilated first. The soldiers didn't appreciate the words coming from that young man. They only asked if it was him. They wanted to know if he was the disciple of the Formation Guardian, the one who killed the youngest. They remembered him saying he wouldn't leave ashes in Gangdong or anywhere else in the world. Even after seeing how easily he defeated the leader, they still thought they might have a chance to defeat him. They were ordered to form a new formation and surrounded him. Standing at the center, he heard some advising caution against poisons and hidden weapons, and others suggested focusing on exhausting his strength, until they managed to surround him. Now the Black Moon Sword sect leader, Mak Inhu, was determined not to ignore his youngest's death, as it seemed painful, so that the sacrifice of those who were annihilated wouldn't be in vain. He had to be eliminated. He still hadn't moved a step. He stood at the center, waiting for them to attack. Though that Chasrian formation reminded him of training back then, he displayed the dance of the whirling dog. This brought him satisfaction. Perhaps he could test something different this time. A lot of sand began to rise in the center around him. They noticed he had disappeared, vanishing from the circle they had formed. Worried, they wanted to know where he was. They shouted. When they noticed where he was, everything began to turn red. They had nowhere to escape. Even the sect leader was alarmed, having missed the moment. Just one young man was causing a great commotion on the battlefield. Soon, others appeared to avenge the brothers who had already been annihilated. Raising his hand to them, he asked if he could borrow their swords. Upon saying this, the swords were destroyed, as if turning to dust. By then, they were already comparing him to a monster. How could he destroy the swords without even touching them? He managed to turn the sword fragments into small broken blades as weapons, controlling the resulting force to spin within each specific area through sheer intent. He used a rotational movement. Everything moved around him, and nothing could hit him. This was certainly the pinnacle of the Tang clan's hidden weapon techniques. Even as he walked, he wasn't attacked. It was the reign of 10,000 heavenly blossoms. Many thought it would be impossible for someone so young to perform the reign of 10,000 heavenly blossoms, let alone match the grandeur of what was called the peak of the reign of 10,000 heavenly blossoms. But it was incomparable against lesser enemies, so he decided to call that technique the Iron Shard Barrage. Yeomyang was curious now. After using men to wear him out, wasn't it his turn to attack? Those words greatly irritated the Black Moon Sword sect leader. He told him that was reckless arrogance, and that he would see how long that spirit lasted, because there was no need to be intimidated, regardless of his achievements with the Taiwa Twin Sword technique. And the Silent Sword technique, known by the syndicate leader, he thought he could grind him to dust. Yeomyang grew bored. That story was being told for the second time. Driven by vengeance, he acted swiftly and told his enemy to be quiet. He shouted that he would crush him, but all he did was draw his short sword and prepare. When the leader used his Taiwa Silent Sword technique, it was countered by the Whirlpool Arc Sword dance, causing much boredom for Yeomyang, and noticing that he was underestimating the attacks, the sect leader grew even more agitated. He used the final strike of the Taiwa Silent Sword, which was countered with a strike from a short blade. And that seemed enough to leave the Black Moon Sword sect leader utterly exhausted. He wondered how a dagger had managed to stop the twin sword technique's attack. Yeomyang said he had some experience in swordsmanship, and quickly grasped the flow of his opponent's sword intent. Showing them generosity, he decided to explain how the move should have been done. Performing it correctly, and using only a short blade left the Black Moon Sword sect leader astonished. He wanted to know how he could wield the silent sword technique. The correct way to execute the technique was realized, and Yeomyang's attack only consumed the area around him. Yeomyang mentioned that since the sword had such a deadly aura, he assumed it had been crafted with killing intent. He made it clear that there was nothing particularly difficult to control. The sect leader looked on in disbelief. Even he could only handle that technique after mastering the ultimate twin sword technique. He recalled that the guy he had eliminated a few hours ago was also using the same technique. He said he didn't know much about them, but he knew they were under the Black Death Alliance. Any martial arts skills the user possessed would be transformed into ascendant martial arts that adapted to the user. He explained that this was why so many people from all walks of life abandoned their past lives to join the Black Death Alliance. Something as trivial as a technique was something anyone could imitate as long as they could handle killing energy. Smiling, he said that he had granted him that type of martial art, as it seemed Ryanju didn't have much faith in him. He also remarked that he seemed to have tried his best for someone who did nothing all day, so he would show a skill in return. He told him not to be surprised after seeing it. However, the Black Moon Sword sect leader was worried about what that skill might be. He didn't know what he was attempting to do. He explained that for someone who had reached the transcendental level, the size of the sword didn't matter. Manhua, despite winning, was still surprised. That boy had great potential, and at that moment, he was performing the Blade River technique. Although the Black Moon Sword sect leader was very experienced and wielded 2 long swords, he was easily astonished by a boy using only a short blade. He heard Yeomyang talk about all the skill he now possessed. He said it wasn't because of his body, which wasn't like before. Manhua thought that the silent sword technique's power was different from that of a normal sword. He realized the young man used blade energy with such ease that he even used the Blade River and noticed he had reached the final stage. Realizing he was in serious danger, the only thing he could do was run and think he wanted to live longer. The young Tang clan member told him he couldn't escape, as he was just running around. But in any case, it would end the moment he was caught. In truth, as a member of the Tang clan, it made more sense to eliminate him in a special way. While Yeomyang calmly prepared to strike, the sect leader ran as fast as he could. He couldn't understand, as he hadn't received any information about a monster of that level in the Tang clan. How could someone who reached the final stage come from a crumbling Tang clan? He knew Ryanju wouldn't just sit and watch. Meanwhile, looking back, he noticed trees were being cut to intimidate him. He didn't understand what that was. It looked like a shuriken emitting energy sounds. To think that those small rings were cutting through trees like someone slicing tofu. All that speed was unusual. When those strikes began hitting him, desperate, he tried to block them. He knew he couldn't get away from everything just by running, and would have to confront it. He stopped bravely to fight for his life. He yelled at those ringed, imbued weapons to come at him, as he was willing to face them all. At first, it seemed to work. He seemed to be holding his own, for he didn't even want to consider the possibility of meeting his end there. But the force of those attacks was so great it caused cracks in his sword, forcing him to deal with the silent sword technique. When his already cracked sword could no longer hold, he began feeling cuts from the trees. They struck various parts of his body, leaving him without some limbs. Even with his sword in terrible condition and now fighting with only one, he didn't stop fighting. And when he realized he had managed to deflect a few, his hatred intensified. He shouted that the Black Moon sect wouldn't fall to something like this. He was ready. He thought that even though he was no longer whole, as long as he remained composed, he could plan the days ahead. What calmed him was imagining that his opponent must have lost a lot of energy with that technique. But the young man appeared, walking calmly and even offering praise. The Black Moon Sword sect leader observed, realizing that even after using such an elaborate technique, he was still full of energy. With a few hand signals, he began attacking again with those weapons. He noticed that the blades were spinning while still embedded in the ground, and when they rose, they kept spinning. He couldn't understand what kind of person that was. He couldn't be a normal human. After leaving everything behind as a Tang clan student, giving his all to the Black Death Alliance, and making a name for himself. Yet, he couldn't even scratch a hair on that young man, and that's when he questioned everything he'd done so far. Yeomyang, realizing that this enemy was already defeated, with a wave of his hand, retrieved his weapons, and those rings began slowly fitting back onto his fingers, spinning without causing a scratch. He looked around to see if he had taken down everyone, as he had tried different techniques. Since he had become the clan's successor, it would be good to teach those below him. He should leave that place as it was, there were loose ends to tie up. He prepared to use one more technique, as he had to deal with the elders who had taken his mother somewhere. The Jigo clan, which planned to take over the Tang clan, needed to be confronted as well. Now it was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and he began to dismantle the formation. Elsewhere, the brigade asked Changshin if there was truly no way. Jigo apologized, explaining that, in fairness, they had made it impossible for anyone to intervene. The supervisor and the rest of Yomyang's group were concerned. However, Jigo knew those were just lies. He had to stay quiet until the work was done. The entrance was completely sealed once they were inside the formation. There was no way anyone could leave the competition field alive. After the men detected outside the unit were subdued and those inside were confirmed. The Great Dark Silence Sword Sect and the Black Moon Sword Sect. He thought that even for number 28, it would be difficult to return alive, though it was a waste of talent. While he was making a speech about the Tang clan's future, he sensed a familiar energy. He knew what was coming would be fatal for him. The supervisor and team members saw who it was and were overjoyed. Tang Yuri threw herself at Yomyang, relieved that he was alive. She reaffirmed that until the competition ended, they would be the only ones allowed to hurt him. However, Jigo, seeing number 28, was terrified. Yet he remained calm, embracing his friends. Jigo thought that his return was impossible, because the 300 soldiers there couldn't handle a young bastard like him. However, Yomyang cast a look at him that made him shudder. After receiving that look, he just covered his face with his fan. Yomyang also saw Tang Jianjil, who greeted him with a raised hand, but in return, he received only a glance. Jigo couldn't believe or accept any of this. He remembered that, back then, he had managed to break through, even a 7-locked ghost formation. That unit had been created for battle. It wasn't different from the 8 laws and earthly punishments, as even the master would have difficulty. But he simply walked through all of it. Perhaps that young man realized he was being watched again. Yomyang, if he could, would have eliminated him immediately, but he shouldn't do anything he could be blamed for until he became chief. The supervisor was relieved that number 28, Tang Yomyang, was safe. He apologized for causing the Warrior 1 Gene so much worry. As he spoke, he thought he would first take care of the elders. The supervisor said he was relieved he was safe, but he wanted to know what had happened, and also what had happened to the remaining competitors. Out of nowhere, it began to tremble, as if there were an earthquake. The brigade warriors drew attention to the sky. There was a crack that seemed nearby. Light was coming from the crack. Jigo knew the unit continuing the 7-locked ghost formation was breaking. Now everyone could see the broken fragments, and the images of what happened inside were visible in all the fragments. Relieved not to have to explain anything, as everything was clear. The brigade was watching, seeing the different uniforms. Most of them belonged to the Black Moon Sword sects. The supervisor was in awe, as he had really faced all those people alone. They called the brigade master's attention to something. It showed the leader of the Black Moon Sword sect. That double sword sheath on his back. Judging by the description, he was certain it was Mak Inhu. The supervisor knew that Mak Inhu was no match for that young man. However, he calmly said there were many of them. It wasn't that difficult to handle them all. The brigade leader expected nothing less of him. He had already surpassed the level of a leader. He had dealt with them all alone, even though there were more than 100 of them. Additionally, the Black Moon Sword was quite renowned. The position of leader belonged to him from the start, his team said. While everyone was celebrating, Moon-chan felt like a dead weight, as his arm had been ruined. He still held much resentment and hatred for Tang Yomyang. He thought he was just a piece of trash who used to struggle because he couldn't even learn martial arts. And he was wondering how someone like him could dare so much when he heard the tournament was over. They announced the winner, number 28, Tang Yomyang. They also called for anyone who had an objection to the result to step forward. Moon-chan had objections, but he couldn't do anything in those conditions. All he could do was wait. With no objections, it was announced that the entire process had been completed for a fair outcome. They shouted, declaring the tournament finalized, and all the warriors were to gather immediately in front of the winner, Tang Yomyang. His team was very satisfied. They couldn't believe they had faced so many warriors, and the feelings were overwhelming. The supervisor thought that, after decades of the Tang clan's decline, finally, the tournament winner was Tang Yomyang. He felt that the new leader who would bring about the clan's rebirth had been born. There they named him as the new master. It was said that there were 82 members besides Tang Wenjin. He knelt and saluted the new Tang clan chief, and everyone shouted long life to the new leader. His group noticed that after becoming chief, he was being treated differently. However, they didn't know if they should speak formally with him too. The supervisor thought that, at an age where he wasn't even 20, if he were capable of growing, he could once again restore the reputation of a prestigious clan. Yomyang shouted that he knew what they wanted. It wouldn't take long for it to become reality. Everyone thought that with those words, he seemed to read their minds. The weight of his words cemented his position over them. and they said they would follow the tournament winner. His order was for them to prepare, as they would return to the main house. Moon-chan was enraged. He didn't know why Yeomyeon got everything he wanted. However, he wanted revenge, no matter how, even if he had to sell his soul to a being. After some time, everyone had withdrawn from there, leaving only bodies behind. Taehyo, from the United Sect, looked at the ground in the bodies, lamenting for his leader, and said he had come as soon as he heard about the situation. Several others arrived, saying he shouldn't walk alone like that. They told him he was now at the top and should fulfill his role well. However, he said he couldn't hear anything and thought it was odd. Hyunso told him not to change the subject. He mentioned it was impossible to sleep next to a mountain full of bodies and even said he'd leave the area immediately. However, Hyunso thought it unusual for over 300 people to have been annihilated. It was because an old eagle was better than a young crow, as expected from a clan that used to have prestige. They found it strange, as there were fewer than 100 members of the Tang clan, and this was an open area. It was odd that something so large had happened without them knowing. That's why he thought they were sent there on purpose. However, they didn't know the reason for sending him. Furthermore, the Blood family even sent valuable items in honor of the tournament. Unless they were hiding something, they couldn't be certain anyway. The leader didn't know that the Kong family's blade technique had diminished so much. How many people were annihilated by a single dagger? This caught Hyunso's attention, who was shocked because he heard that the work had been done by just one person. That couldn't fool his eyes, although most of them showed signs of being defeated by an apparent sword technique. However, seeing those who couldn't even draw their weapons meant they were dealt with in mere seconds. They ought to know the person, that's why they would go to Sichuan. Hyunso feared they might encounter them by accident on the way there. However, the leader asked if he'd forgotten how he reached the top. It wouldn't be hard to protect himself, so there was no need to worry. He knew that wasn't the case, but he was still concerned for the master. He told the master that even if he were a fool, he truly thought he could manage a fight with him. He thought the master, very stubborn, should return to the clan first and could at least say something to the leader. Currently, the Black Death Knot Alliance was located to the south, while the demonic cult was to the east. However, the master was planning to visit the leader who had caused such disaster. He thought the master might be planning to make the Tang clan deal with the Black Death Alliance. Either way, he believed the Tang clan had been ruined for some time. However, he sincerely hoped there wouldn't be a need to use the demonic sword technique. Elder Sanjangro listened to the warriors bringing in the competition participants. It seemed the competition was ending faster than expected. He thought that with the skill of that child, Yanggryang, and with the fire dragon poison she possessed, it shouldn't have been that hard to win the competition. Someone informed him that among those who returned, he hadn't seen that lady. This startled the elder. Comments were that the leader's grandson would likely win, but the girl had trained like crazy after her face was scarred. In any case, as long as they all returned, those people were important. They noticed the Tang family crest. They weren't warriors, meaning the tournament competitors had returned. They thought the competition had already ended, and time had passed so quickly. Looking at Tang Yeomyeon, they asked who that guy was who even had the gaze of the girls around him. A father, upon recognizing his daughter among the competitors, cried with emotion. It was a relief for his eyes. He also saw young Master Jianjil, and thought he had a happy expression. Many found their loved ones and relatives among the crowd. Those who weren't seen already caused concern and tears. Yeomyeon knew those tearful faces were the parents of people who didn't make it through the competition. He thought his mother must also be very worried about him. What should he do if he went home and she didn't recognize him? He was curious about her look of surprise. To interrupt his happy thoughts, Tang Yuri called out to him and asked him to look to the side. She pointed out the General Administration Department. She told him she was seeing the man with glasses over there. Happily, she said that was her father. He noticed he was freckled and told her to take good care of her father. Getting closer, she said she simply wouldn't miss an opportunity like this. She mentioned he hadn't been promoted because he was too kind to others, and that's why he'd been doing various tasks until now. Yeonmyeon thought that wasn't bad for him anyway. Those who were in contact with the elders could be a problem when he took control. Better than that, he knew it was good to find people who were on his side. So, he thought he should find out more about Aijin, and Mirio suspected Aijin was involved in the timing. The Tang clan's general commander, Tang no Kism, was saying the warriors had done a good job. Changshin greeted the clan chief. The commander said he would not forget how the Jiggle clan helped the main house. Jiggle only asked that they help them when they could. He was pleased, thinking he had managed to win the competition peacefully because of it. As Changshin arrived, one of his accomplishments was observed by Yeomyeon. He informed everyone that he had already notified the elders and that they should go there. The warriors could be dismissed and rest. He said that after many years of effort, their missions were complete, and fatigue must have built up. The brigade leader apologized but said he wouldn't go to the elder's house. He introduced himself as Tang Wonjin, and said he had been temporarily placed in charge of the honor guards. The general leader, looking at him, asked if he had heard correctly, and he didn't want to go to the elder's house. The brigade leader believed that, according to the competition rules, there was mention of the winner and the Tower of Stealth and Poisons. It didn't make sense to go to the Tower of Stealth and Poison instead of the elder's house. The commander wanted to know how a mere warrior had the audacity to speak about principles in front of him. The brigade leader thought that protesting meant they were being told not to follow the elder's orders. Stepping forward, Yeomyang said that if there was someone in the main house with more power than the family head, he asked, looking around, who in the world he, the competition winner, Tang Yeomyang, was. The commander reported what had happened to the elders, who couldn't believe he was the competition winner. The general commander was even sweating as he said the competitor and winner was Tang Yeomyang. Everyone thought it was impossible. How could someone like him win? They mentioned the fire dragon poison. He hadn't even managed to use it. The disciple Gukrin had lost again to Yeomyang, and the Sichuan leader couldn't believe the words he was hearing. A person whose quality and dedication he recognized. He couldn't believe the position of chief would be given to this child. Before the championship started, when they saw that child, they were sure he wouldn't be able to beat Gukrin. They couldn't believe he had improved so much in 3 years. It was impossible. They were certain he had used some trick. The second elder, Tang Myeongxing, thought he would leave because he had decided to forget what happened during the war. The fourth elder agreed. How could someone like him beat guys like the other candidates? He thought they could find an answer if they all wanted to know where Tang Yeomyang was. He asked why he hadn't come to the elder's house. He said that only the clan leader could order the successor, just because the leader's position was vacant. He reminded them he had been challenged for wanting not to comply with decisions. He said he had not yet been officially recognized as the successor. The commander knew the position would be in jeopardy if someone with resentment toward the elders became the successor. He recommended that Yeomyang not anger the elders. Yeomyang, with a decisive look, told him that was enough. That was enough to make all his bones tremble. They noticed when that dark, murderous aura emanated from him. They knew that if they angered him further, they could be disintegrated. Afraid of his end, he decided to speak with the elders. The young winner said he didn't care what the lazy old men thought. He declared that they should make it clear the competition was over. Their reign would also end at that moment. Yeomyang ordered the commander to inform the elders to come to him. He also told him to notify them that their reign had ended. The elder thought it was the arrogance of a foolish young man. Even the poison phoenix had to be cautious in their presence. But this could also be a good thing. He had not yet been officially recognized as the sect leader. All they had to do was question his attitude and revoke his qualifications. The Tower of Stealth and Poisons, as he suggested. They needed to assess his capabilities, and the elder informed the warriors waiting outside to listen. He spoke to the troops under the direct command of the great elder, telling them to prepare now to move to the Tower of Stealth and Poison. He also instructed the integrity troops of the second elder, as well as the poisonous troops of the fourth elder. It was said to follow the elders as instructed and the shadow troops of the fifth elder. The Blue Dragon Master was summoned to lead the Blue Dragon Force, and they were to follow. They would dare to challenge the authority of the Elders' Council and act with insolence to show that young man the reality. He would learn who was truly the master of the Tang family. The Dark King, Tang Jiaqui, could hardly believe that his nephew had won the competition to succeed the Tang clan. Yeomyang assured him that he had heard correctly. The Dark King had sensed that this boy was unique, even when he was just a child. But now his aura was incomparably stronger. He knew his sister would be pleased. The Poison King, Tang Jiahyuk, father of Tang Moonchan, was shocked to realize he had won the competition. Previously, he had gone to Yeomyang's home and guaranteed that both he and his mother would suffer the consequences. For what was done to his son's arm, he had turned his back and said that even if it took 4 years. Now he was face to face with the new leader, who questioned him about what he had said before. With a menacing look, Yeomyang told him he was right. It hadn't even taken 4 years. He advised him to be careful with every word while in the Tang house. Otherwise, he might also destroy the arm of his other son. His uncle, the Dark King, noticed that he had held on to some anger. Meanwhile, the brigade leader was worried about Tang Yeomyang. He remembered when the general had been startled to see the son of the Poison Phoenix. However, until that moment, he hadn't known he was the son of the Poison Phoenix. He had said before that there were things he should know. However, that could be discussed later. The brigade leader now realized that it was true. He was the son of that person. If that were true, it was all because of the conflict with the heavenly bright demon lord, who had set his sights on the Poison Phoenix. The Tang family warriors fought with their lives, and although vitality was equal, the power difference seemed vast. Chaos and destruction were unleashed in that territory. Their resistance had been stronger than expected, so much so that the leader paid with his life. And even so, it was not over yet. Under the order of that tyrant, they were told to release. They continued advancing, ignoring even poison techniques, unconcerned about death. Reinforcements were requested from the elders to face the attacks of the heavenly bright demon lord, but they refused to contribute their strength. Had they helped, they could have reduced the damage. However, those shameless people blamed the phoenix, saying that if she had only followed the intentions of the heavenly bright demon lord, the clan's losses could have been avoided. Unable to enter the battlefield, they accepted the accusation from the elders' leader, even though she was blameless. She should have been there to protect the young lord under her care. He thought that everyone had noticed whose son the young man was, especially those who had failed in their duty that day. It was as if another chance had appeared in their path, and this time they should. He was interrupted by a voice shouting for him to stop. It seemed he knew whose voice it was. Yeomyang suggested they go outside to see. The honor guards truly thought they could challenge the elder council. The elder leader wanted to know where Tang Yeomyang was. The brigade leader saw that, as the young man had predicted, he hadn't expected his own forces to be immobilized as well. The brigade leader, seeing everyone there, realized it was because they felt their positions were threatened. The elder leader warned that his words weren't sounding understandable and ordered them to bring Yeomyang immediately. However, the young man said there was no need to look for him, as he was already there. The Dark King noticed that the third elder and the others were also all there. They asked how he dared to claim the seat of future clan leader, which shouldn't be occupied without their permission. Yeomyang stated that he had already proven his abilities by winning the competition and that they were checking for any injustices present in the tower. Then, staring at them, he asked what more they needed. The elders were fed up with his unpleasant nature. What kind of language was that to speak in front of the clan elders? The branch leader was told that if he wanted to live, he shouldn't reveal everything that happened inside the competition exam. Yeomyang had already heard that what happened in the competition should be spoken about. It seemed that the clan's law was lighter than expected. He went on to say that he believed he had gained an unfair advantage. The elders shouted that there had been interference from the Black Moon Sword sect, with nearly 300 enemy soldiers. If this was outside interference, they could say that the competition was fair. Yeomyang explained that Tang Gukrin and Tang Yanggriang killed other participants, and he had merely finished the competition by annihilating them. Their intervention was after the competition, so he didn't see where there was any injustice. The elder was furious to hear that the young man had eliminated his grandson. At that moment, the young man told him that if he found it hard to believe, he could just return to the mountain and see for himself. If the Gangnong sect hadn't cleaned the area, he would still be there. The elder, completely beside himself, launched a fatal strike in the young man's direction. And because of this unexpected attack, the Dark King and the brigade leader grew concerned. The attack was so powerful that it even struck several people in the vicinity. The elder called him a fool and said he had only brought up this matter because he wanted to. Blocking the elder's attack with one hand, he looked at him and asked if he really couldn't believe it. All those nearby couldn't believe what they were seeing. Stopping that attack, he looked at the elder and asked if he couldn't believe that his grandson was already gone. The elder couldn't believe that his demon-killing poison had been blocked with just one hand. How was it stopped so easily? He thought that the young man might have surpassed the internal energy the elder had cultivated over decades. However, he found that impossible and asked how he dared to mock him, an elder. Yeomyang pulled out the poison vial that had belonged to Yanggriang and showed it to him, handing it to the elder, who asked where he had gotten it. Yeomyang asked what he knew and said it must be quite unsettling. Throwing the poison vial at the elder and accusing him, he said that he had given it to his granddaughter. He stated that if it were just a simple poison vial, it might go unnoticed. But this was one of the Tang clan's poisons, one of the 10 poisons of the clan. Upon seeing this, the brigade leader asked if the contents of the vial could be what Yeomyang claimed. It was indeed the fire dragon poison. This left the brigade leader and his warriors stunned. That explained why they had felt such a strong and burning energy. The vial broke the containment managed by the third elder. Yeomyang remarked that burying the Tang clan's 10 poisons in the burial brigade was trivial, enough to be used for personal greed. The brigade leader replied that, to his knowledge, it was dangerous enough to bring down even the most skilled warriors in the martial realm. And with its formula lost, the 10 poisons had become even more dangerous. The Tang clan held more value than any other treasure. Therefore, using the fire dragon poison for personal gain demanded severe punishment. One of the elders shouted, asking what he was trying to imply. The elder asked how he dared to speak of severe punishment for a clan elder, and why they hadn't yet seized that man. Yeomyang questioned why they hadn't seized that man yet, even if he bore the title of elder. He stated that he wouldn't escape the clan's laws nor die with honor. He told him that, at the very least, his granddaughter would be waiting for him in the afterlife and allowed the fire dragon poison flames to consume him. He declared that all the elders were corrupted and questioned what right they had to judge the clan leader's seat. He stated that he would decide for himself where he would stand. The brigade leader and his soldiers realized that he had remained calm in front of the elders, and they thought the clan's fate could change. However, the elder leader wanted to know what he was doing and how he dared to kill a clan elder. Then he spoke to the Grand Elder Tang Srokjung and asked if he knew his disciple had put the clan in danger. The elder wanted to know what he was talking about. Yeomyang asked if he truly understood. He said that he was a spy from the Dark Moon sect and asked if he didn't find it all absurd. The young man said he should have heard that the Dark Moon Sword sect had invaded the competition area. The elder asked if he was conspiring with the enemies and what evidence he had. Then Yeomyang said he would tell and looked at Tang Jianjil. He explained to everyone that he was the only witness who could prove that the elder was a spy. He recounted that earlier, in Yeomyang's isolation hall, he had fought Tang Gukrin and obtained that experiment. And as they could see, those wounds couldn't have been caused by poison or stealth techniques, because he used the sword technique at that moment and hadn't noticed. But perhaps what he used wasn't a dual sword technique. However, the elder said that was just a supposition. The elder began to be questioned, as it wasn't mere speculation. He had already seen Mak and Hu use that sword technique from a distance. Everyone noticed that most of those attacked by him had been severely mutilated. The young man continued, saying that, moreover, before trying to destroy him, the elder had confessed to being a spy and that his name was Mak Injuk. At that moment, Celso realized that name belonged to a discarded bastard, the child born of a servant, as rumors said. Yeomyang told Tang Jianjil that he was going to use him as a witness, but he never expected him to step forward first. The young man said he owed his life to him, so he felt it fair to repay. Yeomyang thanked him, saying this would make things easier. The spy thought that the child really was a spy, but that was no longer important at that moment. If he kept going like this, he wouldn't be safe either, so he shouted to Elder Junryang to block that man. The brigade warriors wondered why Elder Paryong had not yet been punished as an elder. However, the young man walked toward the elder, telling him not to act hastily. He couldn't simply ignore him. Even if Tang Gukrin were to become the clan leader and the Tang clan fell into the hands of the Dark Moon Sword sect, the young clan leader thought the elder was acting with extreme recklessness. Seeing that he was prepared to attack, the elder could do nothing, for at that moment, his arm was severed. It happened so quickly that it couldn't even be seen. The Dark King and the brigade leader were terrified to see young Yeomyang delivering justice. Yeomyang stated that there was no evidence of collusion and that the punishment would end there. After thanking him for the mercy given, the elder thought it had happened so fast he couldn't even see it with his own eyes. But when they thought he was merely holding back, that's when he extracted the poison. Among the clan's main poisons, the formless poison was colorless, odorless, tasteless, and extremely lethal, though it wasn't as potent as the complete formless poison. The elder believed that the formless poison he had created over half a lifetime. No matter the skill level, no one would survive that poison. His sole thought was to exact revenge without leaving a trace. However, the young leader observed the elder kneeling, and looking deeply into his eyes, he asked if he had really done everything he could. The elder considered the possibility that he had noticed. At that moment, his hand was also severed from his body. No one understood what madness this was, as he had said he wanted to be merciful, and then declared he had the right to ascend as the clan leader. Some asked to wait a moment to observe what was happening. Attention was drawn to the elder's hand. There was an object fallen beside the hand, a poison vial. Yeomyang, looking at the elder, said he had noticed when he pretended to beat him to launch a poison attack. He thought it utterly disgraceful for the elder to ask the clan leader for mercy, so he had to punish him for attempting to execute the leader and violating clan rules. He would have condemned a traitor and punished him severely. Then he began to impose discipline. After asserting his unquestionable leadership, everyone else observed in silence. He showed the elders that they were not above the laws of the Tang clan. He announced that anyone who violated the clan's laws again, using their position, would personally face his justice. He stated that the clan had declined and that it wouldn't be surprising if it collapsed at any moment in such a condition. He promised to ensure that clan members wouldn't be exposed to threats from evil sects if they recognized him as the legitimate leader of the Tang clan. In Tang Jaihai's residence, news reached the mother of the young clan leader. She could hardly believe he had truly managed to win the competition, bringing down the elders and making them recognize him. She also couldn't forget that scene. She recounted that everyone in the Tower of Stealth and Poison was kneeling and recognizing him. She said he had grown splendidly. She wished Longriang were alive to hear the news. He would have been happy. Yeomyang wanted to run to his mother and tell her he survived, but there were mountains of tasks to handle. The Dark King stated that, per the clan leader's orders, subsequent events and issues would be handled in the tower. The elders seemed displeased, but none openly expressed dissatisfaction. Although it was clear the clan leader's character was exceptional, his experience was still not vast. However, only Elder O expressed concerns. Not wanting to lose power, they planned to use his lack of experience and youth as an excuse. Saying that the elder's words made sense, Yeomyang said he would decide later who would take over the regency. However, After investigation, the smuggling of the fire dragon poison by the third elder was proven true. Slowly, doubts arose about the Council of Elders' management abilities after proving that the quantities of poison had decreased. Management of the 10 poisons was also assigned to the Tower of Fertility and Poison, with the elders losing most of their authority. Since he wasn't interested in collecting them, military forces would continue to be managed by the elders. Since the Direct Command Force and the Sovereign Spirit Force lost their affiliation due to the death of one of the elders, no one took over. Thus, the two forces would be merged into the Shadow Troops, and would be assigned to the Tower of Fertility and Poisons. Yeonmyoung said that although some expressed dissatisfaction with their treatment, they should forget about privileges. Neglecting duties with unjustifiable excuses or causing friction with existing external warriors would lead to severe punishment. A few days later, the elders mentioned they heard that the clan leader had called. Jigel didn't think Yeonmyoung would use legitimate force to overthrow the Council of Elders. He knew that a single wrong word could not escape judgment. Yeonmyoung asked if he had been too busy neglecting them. There was something he wanted to ask everyone. Jigel barely recognized number 28. He asked if everyone was surprised because of the clothes they were wearing. Everyone was upset, as he was not officially the clan leader yet, but it seemed he was declaring himself the clan's owner. Jigel asked what request he had. The young man said he heard the defensive formations were remarkable. He said that unwanted visitors wouldn't even be able to enter, and would wander around. He said he wanted that formation installed there to keep accepted malignant scum away. Jigel was very startled and said that the main house formation could not be installed without the leader's permission. He then tried to explain that the formations require valuable items passed down as family treasures. Not liking that answer, he launched an attack that hit the others in the room. It was terrifying. Jigel continued speaking about installing the formation. Looking back and seeing his fallen companions, he asked the clan leader why he was doing that. Yeonmyoung made it clear he already knew about his agreement with Tang Yangryang, and although he was capable of preventing the invasion of the Black Moon Sword sect, he chose not to block it. He thought he would simply ignore it. He wouldn't say much. He would install a defense similar to the Jigel clans in Tang's main quarters. Jigel was about to say something when he was questioned that this was not a simple matter. He asked if he had heard about the clan's rules. He reminded him that the Tang clan rule was to return an offense tenfold. He mentioned that's why the elders met a grim fate. He would also count to 3. If there was no positive response, he would personally go to Jigel, and he would hold Jigel Chongqing accountable for that incident. After that, he would leave it to his imagination what would happen next. When he heard the count at 2, he shouted that he would comply. He apologized and asked, please, to forgive and spare his clan members. Yeonmyoung said he trusted that he would act quickly. He explained himself for not calling his team members earlier. Tang Mirio wanted to know why the clan leader was calling for him. Calling him clan leader, he couldn't hold back laughter and thought they didn't need to be so formal. Upon hearing this, Tang Ijin felt at ease and put his feet up on the table. Tang Yuri wanted to know the reason for calling them. He announced that he had just appointed her father as the new general commander. He said her father was certainly quite capable. He commented that silencing opposing voices wasn't too hard, but it would be problematic if what he said wasn't true, and if her father showed favoritism and neglected his duties or diverted funds in secret. Then it would be settled, and he asked her to help her father adapt to the general commander's functions. He thought her father would showcase his abilities, so they didn't need to worry. However, he wanted to know about Mirio and Ijin's situations, and that's why he called them. Yeonmyoung said that if there was anyone with exceptional skills but was being excluded or ignored for not having connections with the elders, they could speak up, as he planned to keep them under his protection since it didn't make sense to have people close to the elders near him. Ijin remained silent, so he asked if he didn't have anyone related to the King of Medicine Hall. He wasn't sure if he should mention the King of Medicine Hall. That matter also concerned Yeonmyoung. It especially had to do with what happened to his father. The people involved in the poisoning of the young master's father were people from the King of Medicine Hall. Tang Mirio said he might have heard wrong. It was unlikely the King of Medicine Hall was involved. Tang Yuri, angry and slamming her hand on the table, wanted to know how they dared to mess with the clan leader's family. She would put an end to it. However, Yeonmyoung asked the young man to continue speaking. The King of Medicine Hall was so isolated within the main house that even the Council of Elders couldn't reach it. All medical and toxicology studies were conducted there, and they sustained their finances by treating patients. The King of Medicine Hall provided the necessary funds for clan expenses, and the leader of the King of Medicine Hall was his grandfather. During the time his grandfather was the leader, someone visited him every day, and that was Tang Yeonmyoung's father. After the invasion of the Bright Sky Demon Lord, as resentment toward the King of Medicine Hall increased, he always defended the King of Medicine Hall against defamation. However, since his father had no internal energy, an attack using internal energy would ensure that the attacked person would never be able to dissipate the energy, resulting in severe internal injuries. Even so, his father kept fighting despite everything. That's when things escalated back then. Those holding the vice leader position in the King of Medicine Hall were Tang Il. There was an argument between him and the young leader's father, who recounted that he caught Tang Il defaming his wife. Instead of apologizing, he even tried to use martial arts when he lost the argument, and was only stopped when the grandfather intervened. Because of that incident, Tang Il was excluded as a candidate for leader. After hearing that, Yeomyang concluded that he had harbored resentment and poisoned his father. He realized that, afterward, he killed the young master's father and began taking over the medicine hall. Aijin said that he also poisoned his grandfather and imprisoned him. Tang Mirio didn't know things like that happened and were hidden. Even if it was an isolated place, that was no excuse. Aijin said that since he was poisoned, his grandfather was no longer in his right mind. Therefore, even if he explained the situation, no one would care to help him. He entered the competition, and during the 3 years of competition, he couldn't eliminate the people who knew about the incident. He wanted to see how his grandfather's condition was at that moment, but he was too afraid to go. And apologizing to the clan leader seemed difficult, as well as finding the talents he was looking for in the King of Medicine Hall. Yeomyang asked if he knew why the vice leader kept his grandfather alive. It would have been easier to silence him. He said that, if he was right, there might be a secret division within the King of Medicine Hall that even the elders didn't know about. An internal pill made from a mythological creature said to live in lava, called the 10,000-year fire carp. Yuri seemed to have heard that name before. However, Mirio appeared not to know about the existence of such a thing. Yeomyang wanted to know what a final internal pill was, and being merely an item that increased internal strength. It wasn't that simple. About 100 years ago, there was a tale saying that the lesser lord of the Blazing Sun Palace took the pill. He had achieved enormous fire energy, ascending to the fire realm, even though the Blazing Sun Palace had now vanished into history. But the truth is that he reached the fire realm by taking the internal pill. The story was passed down to future generations. Inevitably, the continuous poison was strong. If taken without neutralizing the poison, 9 out of 10 times, it would lead to death. The leader wanted to know if, indeed, the effectiveness of the internal pill could be preserved without removing the poison by anyone except his grandfather. Aijin, in tears, replied that it could. The current leader's goal was to consume the full internal pill and ascend to the fire realm. And after that, they planned to lead their followers out of the clan and become the head of their own clan. Everyone knew that this was no different from a rebellion. He thought that the realm he sought, the weariness without true enlightenment, was precisely the fire realm. During the 3 years they spent together, he never noticed because he never showed it, even after all that happened. Yeomyang thanked him. As he knew it would be difficult to have said all that, he said he was truly grateful for him having spoken everything. However, he wanted to ask one more thing. If he expelled the current members of the King of Medicine Hall and restored his grandfather's strength, could the King of Medicine Hall function adequately as it did before? And if it were only about his grandfather, and if it were only because of his poisoned grandfather, could he do something about it? Aijin replied that it would be possible. He didn't consider himself any less capable than the current leader. If some important figures in medicine were recruited, he could teach. Yeomyang explained that that was enough. However, now he wanted to hear Tang Mirio's story as soon as he finished dealing with the story of the King of Medicine. He was going immediately, and Aijin wanted to know if he was sure. He hadn't visited his mother since he arrived from the main house. He simply said that she would understand why the clan leader couldn't let a traitor roam free. Above all, she wouldn't want him to be stopped after hearing what someone close had gone through. Before departing, he declared that he would completely erase the King of Medicine Hall as he had known it. Meanwhile, at the King of Medicine Hall, the person in charge learned that Longriang's son had become the clan leader. He thought that everything incriminating him had happened before his birth, so there was no way he would know. Even so, he worried since Tang Aijin had not yet returned to the King of Medicine Hall. However, he should value his own life above all else. Although he could kill him at any time, the issue was the internal pill. To fully absorb the energy of the internal pill and reach the fire realm, it was necessary for that cursed old man to speak, but even if he regained his sanity, he wouldn't do such a thing. However, if he tried to remove the capsule's poison himself and made a mistake, he could lose the entire internal pill. He needed to find a better solution. He was thinking when a commotion started interrupting his thoughts. Some of his subordinates were shouting that the clan leader was causing a disturbance. He was told that the clan leader was destroying the entire hall. Many begged him to stop and remember where he was. Yeomyang asked Aijin if he had found him, but the answer was negative. He said he had searched the entire medicine hall but found no sign of his grandfather. Aijin was furious and demanded answers about his grandfather's whereabouts. Many looked at each other, but no one spoke. Yeomyang warned that lying in his presence, ordered Brigade Leader Won Jin to handle the matter. It was swiftly resolved with their heads removed from their bodies. He asked who they were trying to fool with those shifty glances. He was told not to test his patience, but if they wanted, they could go ahead and keep pretending. However, he would only need one mouth to speak anyway. It was quickly revealed that the current leader had ordered the former leader to be imprisoned in Nook. Upon hearing that his grandfather was in such a place, he became desperate. That place was made to isolate suspects who might be infected, but due to the cold environment, it worsened the situation. Yeonmyeong announced that he would enter with Aijin and asked Brigade Bongo to clear everything there and wait at the entrance. At that moment, many begged the leader to show some mercy. However, Bongo showed the same mercy they showed his grandfather. Upon entering, he thought it was deep and must have been made in a cave, and the name suited the place. Aijin showed the entrance to Nook. He said his grandfather had to be alright, but he feared it might be too late. Yeonmyeong had already sensed his presence, and told Aijin not to worry. He had just found him. The grandson rushed to the cell, shouting to his grandfather that he was there. Yeonmyeong asked him to step aside, as he would cut those bars with a technique. Aijin, seeing his grandfather in that condition, was in tears. When he left for the competition, he hadn't been like that. The leader asked him to calm down, as he would save his grandfather, and asked what poisons were used. He replied that it was the subjugative poison and the thunder madness poison. He explained it was a poison that affected the brain, meant to drive a person mad rather than kill them, and that without early intervention, there was no proper way to care for it. Yeonmyeong found it all very simple, as it was just poison. He asked a friend to hold his grandfather firmly, and began using universal poison absorption. This would devour all the poison within his body. The grandson was pleased as his grandfather's hand began to show signs of life. The clan leader looked for a way to cause the least harm to his grandfather's fragile body and only absorbed the poison. The grandson also noticed that his breathing was returning and his color was improving. Seeing that his grandfather was better, he asked the grandson to help him stand up. The weakened man asked where he was. After opening his eyes, he realized his grandson Aijin was there. However, when he looked at the young leader, he thought it was his father. After everything was explained, he realized that his son was now leading the clan, and he had come to save him at the grandson's request, as he had cared for his father. The man, in tears, was content because a child who couldn't even see his father's face because of him was now saving him. He thought that if only the father could be alive to see how well his son was doing. He said that, even though he was a frail man, he would like to dedicate his service to the clan leader. Agreeing, he placed his cloak over the elder to protect him from the cold. He also told him that the reason he was there was to organize new positions for the leader and Aijin. He asked her to leave, as there were people waiting for that elder. The leader of the King of Medicine Hall couldn't believe that the old man was standing so firmly. He asked the clan leader how he could mercilessly harm the members of the King of Medicine Hall. He asked if he didn't know that it was the King of Medicine Hall that generated the funds to maintain the Tang clan. Yeonmyeong asked him if, even after seeing where he came from, he would still continue pretending. He said that was enough for his final words. He asked the elder if he had any last words to say. Seeing that he just shook his head in denial, he would resolve the matter quickly. However, the former leader of the King of Medicine Hall tried to escape to avoid punishment. He didn't get far, as his movements were paralyzed. The clan leader informed him that it was a poison called Heart Splitter, and it had been made by Aijin. He also asked what he thought of his skill, as it was enough to replace him. But he thought he probably couldn't even hear. All the others who had sided with the former leader ran off, trying to save themselves. However, it was up to the Bangui Brigade to handle that problem. As things were resolved, the clan leader, the grandson, and his grandfather left. Rumors spread quickly within the clan that the King of Medicine Hall had fallen. People said that the clan wouldn't survive without the King of Medicine Hall, and that removing the source of their funding was a mistake. It was asked if he would take it at that moment. Since someone like Tang Il could appear, he couldn't just leave it there. Yeonmyeong thanked him, worried, and said he would take it as it was. He was advised that if he wasn't going to use it immediately, it would be better to store it. Just looking at it, one could see it had very strong poison, visible to the naked eye. To dispose of something so precious would be absurd. Even approaching it, one could sense the potent fire poison, as expected from a lava creature. However, it was nothing compared to the poison of the demonic fire dragon he had encountered before. He knew that if an ordinary person touched it in its unrefined state, they could burn from the inside out. It was such a powerful poison that it would be better to investigate further about the 10 poisons. After observing the refinement process, he could definitely feel the spirit's power. He was deep in thought when someone knocked on the door. The person said she was his mother and asked if she could come in. He said she could. Upon opening, he finally saw his mother. She thought she would never be able to come back there again. She was very proud, as she had truly been lucky with the son she had. Her son said that place was hers from the start. Of course, she could come in whenever she wanted. Looking at her, he He thought how beautiful she still was. He wondered how much she must have worried all that time. She gave him a strong hug and said she was so happy he had returned safely. He said of course he would return safely, as he was her son. In his past life, it was different. He had no one to remember or to reflect on the regrets before death. What happened because he had no one with whom to share happiness, even after reaching the end. If in his past life he was alone, that was enough for a life filled with regrets. He remembered when he was forced to fetch her. Everyone was in tears. All those faces were familiar. However, what he was delivering was what he had in that box. He told her it was something he had brought to gift her. When she opened it, she saw what it was. A 10,000-year fire claw internal pill. As expected, his mother immediately recognized it, knowing what it was. Now she just needed to use it. She told him that it was right for him to take it since he wanted to free the clan. However, he explained that the internal pill no longer had any activity at that moment. Still, he asked her to hold it in her hand. She asked him what he meant by saying it was of no further use. He told her there was nothing left for him to increase with that pill. Holding his mother's hand, he let her see that he already belonged to the fire realm. She was happy that he had truly reached the fire realm. She thought that her son being in the fire realm was definitely something she wanted to celebrate. Her son said he wanted her to live a long life, including his father's part. He asked her to care for him as he grew and offered the pill once again. Since the internal pill was slowly fading, they needed to hurry. She said that, of course, it would be rude to refuse when he had kindly brought it to her. She took that moment to ask if he knew what she was called when she was younger. She told him that she was known as the greatest beauty of Sichuan, and was called the Poisonous Phoenix. And at that moment, she unleashed all her power. She explained that the Poisonous Phoenix was a title given to the most renowned members of the clan. She found it interesting, as it had been a while since she'd seen him so surprised. She said that, although she was not as skilled as he was, she could also be impressive. After boosting her strength and taking the internal pill, she went straight into cultivation. And he was still remembering how shocked he was. It was such a shock to see that she had been hiding her strength, and to think that she was cultivating her own strength on her own. In the fire realm, one could detect even the slightest movements, so there was no sense in hiding one's power. He thought she could hide it even from him, who was in the fire realm. Just by looking, he realized she had already reached the state he was in before releasing his power. He thought that perhaps his mother could also surpass her limits, which meant she would soon face a problem. The method of absorbing the internal pill was surprisingly simple. She was slowly drawing the spirituality of the internal pill, and she was absorbing it into her body, preparing to internalize it. This process would repeat until everything was absorbed. However, she doubted she would be able to absorb the entire amount. The spirituality of the pill was slowly fading, and she didn't know what to do. It would disappear completely before she absorbed half of it. It was then that she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was her son's hand, who said he would help her with enlightenment, as it didn't come solely from thinking about it. He told her that she should absorb her surroundings, analyze them, think about them, and by limiting them, it could become an opportunity for enlightenment. This time, he would give a small push. That was how she felt Yomyang's energy. She realized he was touching the internal pill and merging with it. She understood the Tang clan's radiant heart technique of vital blue poison. Spirituality was pure energy and could transform into anything. Therefore, she wouldn't need to absorb it slowly. Instead, she could transform it into something she recognized and absorb it. There would be no need to go through the cultivation process. After transforming the energy, she commanded it to return to her. Honestly, she was blessed with a very good son. With his hand on his mother's shoulder, he sensed when she finished and reached the fire realm. In the Tower of Stealth and Poison, the elders were gathered. Many were unhappy about a morning meeting and still had to wait. One elder asked the King of Darkness how long in the world the clan leader would make them wait. Even though it was the clan leader who summoned them, it shouldn't take that long. The King of Darkness, the young clan leader's uncle, tried to keep calm and assured them he would arrive soon. A short time later, it was announced that the leader was arriving. Everyone stopped talking to pay attention to the leader's entrance. Yomyang, upon entering, thanked them for the morning meeting and informed them he had called everyone to discuss something important. Something he thought they all should hear. One of the elders was curious to know what it was about. He replied that they should have an interim leader until he was old enough. However, he warned that it would not be any of the elders. The elder was startled. If not the elders, then who would it be? At that moment, the person who would be the interim leader entered, and a silhouette appeared. Everyone looked to see if they would recognize who the interim leader was. However, the King of Darkness recognized her as soon as he saw her. It was the beautiful Poisonous Phoenix. The elders were horrified. It had been decades. How could this happen? The clan leader and son of the Poisonous Phoenix said that, in terms of worthiness, she was perfect. After being held responsible for invading Magwangshan a decade ago and being stripped of her leadership position, She had finally begun to make amends and was presenting herself as Tang Jihai. On the night before the interim leader's announcement, she was pleased to have ascended to the fire realm, but she couldn't get used to the impurities coming out of her body. She ended up mistreating one of the servants because of it. In any case, she still wasn't used to having so much strength. It would get better with time. Ascending to the fire realm allowed her to understand her son better. She had recently heard that only the leader of the Black Death Alliance had ascended to the fire realm. She thought she could finally talk about many things with her son after such a long time. He congratulated her on entering the fire realm. His mother thanked him and said it was all thanks to him, asking him to sit with her. They chatted, shared stories, and for a moment, were happy together. A question arose. His mother wanted to know how he entered the fire realm. He wanted to tell the truth, but he thought it might be hard for her, as enlightenment had come from memories of his past life. He imagined he could use the competition as an excuse, so he used one of the poisons as a cover. She mentioned that she had heard the winner of the competition was rewarded with the dragon fire poison. That's when he said he had drunk the dragon fire poison. She thought it reckless to take something like that, but he assured her that, as she could see, he was fine. He explained that after reaching enlightenment by absorbing the poison, he was able to enter the fire realm. She wondered, however, if it was truly possible to reach enlightenment that way. There was another topic she wanted to discuss. It was about the servant who helped her bathe and told her he was dismantling the king of Medicine Hall. He thought it best to be honest in that moment, as it also involved his father. He told her it was exactly as she thought. He shared the whole story as they drank tea. She understood what had happened but had already anticipated it. She mentioned she had her suspicions, but Aijin must have also gone through hard times. She told her son she had a request. She had lived in that clan as though dead, fearing losing her only son after losing her husband. However, she had not remained idle. If he permitted, no one would covet that place again. She wished to protect it. Back to the present, she was entering that meeting hall, and everyone looked at her the same way they had years ago. Her brother, the King of Darkness, was very pleased to see his sister entering that hall again. The son asked them to kindly offer her their sincere congratulations, for she was his mother, Tang Jihai. He spoke loudly so everyone could hear that she would be the new leader of the Tang clan. One of the elders was horrified to hear she would be the interim leader. Graciously, she thanked them for gathering there that day. Although she was the leader, she was only acting as such until the true leader assumed the role. Since the true leader had entrusted her with that responsibility, she planned to rebuild the foundation of the clan that had been ruined. She announced that the meeting would begin at that moment. Since then, Tang Jihai's actions had been truly innovative. She renamed the King of Medicine Hall, as it had become demoralized. Tang Hoyle was appointed as a healer along with his grandson. Yuri's father, who was appointed general manager, was ordered to initiate a full investigation into Gazan. Tang Ji-hyuk, the head of the Tower of Poison Stealth, was replaced. And even if they were not elders, those who abused their positions for any form of misconduct were also removed. All this happened within a few days, and he felt very proud of his mother. The clan's internal issues were resolved thanks to his mother. Initially, he only wanted to live a normal life with his mother, but suddenly, many things started happening around him. People he could call friends, guards who trusted and followed him, and a growing number of Tang clan members. In another place, someone asked if they could speak with the leader. She wanted to talk about Manhua. She explained that he was famous and well known for his strength, the leader of the Transforming Heart sect, Yeosi Orion. She requested please, that he put an end to them before Tang could regain its former reputation. However, the Black Death Alliance leader, Yu Kil-jun, asked why he should do this. Yeosi Orion argued that Manhua was as challenging as he was, but he had already warned him before. He had already told him to leave the Tang clan alone, as one day he would use it. He had disobeyed orders and attacked them. In fact, it was he who opposed his leadership. It was a relief that he had been defeated by the leader's hands. After all, had he returned, he would have faced punishment. Back at his post, Yomyang looked at his village and thought he had many people to protect. It used to be difficult just to keep his body healthy, as he had been troubled by the circumstances of his birth. To prevent anyone from using or coveting the Tang clan, he had grown even stronger. Whether it was the Black Death Alliance or anyone else, no one would ever be able to harm the Tang clan. It was said within the Black Death clan that the Tang clan had a new leader. And the interesting part was that it was he who had ended Manhua. He was not someone who could be easily defeated. He asked her to send a letter to the clan, inviting them to Sichuan for the meeting that would be happening soon. The head of the Tang clan would also be invited. Yomyang, speaking with his mother, was grateful for all her hard work in the internal organization. She mentioned she had felt a bit nervous taking over after so much time. She said she had done a great job, but there was something. She asked why he had suppressed his power, as he did last time, knowing he had noticed since he had experienced it before. He thought it was an impressive suppression. However, He told her that now that she had reached the fire realm, she didn't need to hide her power. She explained it wasn't only about hiding power. What she was doing was the clan's secret technique, the vein concealment seal. She hoped her son would also learn to hide his abilities, but he wanted to know why he should do that. She could explain, but it was a long story. Since the founder of that martial art was an ancestor of the Tang clan, she needed to tell him about him. In a certain village in Sichuan, an epidemic had arisen. Even without famine, people were dying excessively. Dozens of bodies were burned without a proper funeral out of fear of spreading the plague. It was only a matter of time. Everyone in the village had already contracted the plague and was simply waiting for their end, except one. The only 10-year-old boy was the only one unaffected because that boy was the only one intact. There was no time for rational questions in the eyes of those already infected, the 10-year-old boy. He seemed like a harbinger of the plague, a child possessed by an evil spirit. Where could a child expelled from the village go? Hiding in a cave to escape the rain, he stole food left at the shrine near the village to ward off the plague. That boy survived day after day, as the days passed in solitude. And on the third day, no one came to perform the rituals. The boy was the only one left, wondering why he was the only one unharmed. The question didn't last long. Eventually, a group of mysterious people found him. A child with an affinity for poison, the worst group of assassins in Murim history, the Shadow Clan of the Poisonous Moon. They kidnapped people from all over the world and turned them into bandits. They gave them poison to prevent them from fleeing and administered the antidote periodically. So that boy grew up as an annihilator, and over time, he saw the terminal state of his companions, who died after not receiving the antidote in time. He realized that the plague in his village was caused by that poison clan. He realized he wasn't the one who brought the plague. From that moment on, the boy transformed to become stronger. No matter how dangerous the mission, he would accept and complete it with precision. He even managed to annihilate absolute masters, leaving everyone amazed at his performance. As thanks to him, the clan's reputation was sky-high. He was granted the title of one of the 5 great annihilators and was told he could ask for anything. However, he wanted nothing, he needed nothing more. The boy had already reached a high level with the experiences gained from fighting absolute masters, and his ultimate technique, based on the martial arts learned in the clan, was the first storm of 10,000 heavenly blossoms. Thus, the Shadow Clan of the Poisonous Moon disappeared overnight. His mother explained that later, his descendants settled in Sichuan, forming the current Tang clan. And even today, the world remembers him by the nickname Invisible Guest. Yomyang pretended to be asleep, as he was bored. His mother lightly tugged his cheeks to make him pay attention to her again. He said he didn't know about that story. She told him that the story was related to the vein concealment seal. His mother said the Poison Clan had many masters in the Fire Realm, including the 5 great annihilators and the sect leader. She told him he was partly correct about the storm of 10,000 heavenly blossoms, but it wasn't only about hidden weapons. The storm of 10,000 heavenly blossoms was a martial art that controlled energy. This piqued his interest. He asked if she was saying it was a martial art that controlled energy, not just hidden weapons. Battles in the Fire Realm were energy confrontations. When the opponent attacked with energy, one had to defend with energy. Common hidden weapon techniques couldn't penetrate the protective energy of a Fire Realm master's body. He then remembered that, no matter how many hidden weapons there were, they simply wouldn't have an effect. He also noted that, no matter how skilled a master was, maintaining that level of energy must be difficult. His mother explained that he seemed to be wondering how someone could maintain so much energy. The answer lay in the vein concealment seal. The basic principle of the vein concealment seal was as follows. Compress all internal energy flowing through the meridian and concentrate it in one of the 12 main meridians, so that the internal energy would not flow. It was encapsulated by true energy. This method could deceive a Fire Realm master capable of seeing the internal energy flow. But with accumulated experience and knowledge, it could be easily reconstructed. The true energy protecting the internal energy intertwined, creating a new protective layer. This was the body's protective energy. Known as the dragon scale, it was said to surpass the defense of the existing body's protective energy, and its strength was said to be comparable to scales. He was thinking that the first dragon fire poison now seemed like he had actually seen a real dragon. She continued, saying that aside from purifying energy, it wasn't only for defense. When she released the internal energy sealed in the 12 meridians for years, she could temporarily use over 10 times her original internal energy. Yomyang wanted to know if the storm of 10,000 heavenly blossoms was a martial art that required releasing the vein seal to be used. She said that was it. Several key points had been passed down with the vein poison concealment, but they were lost. The orally transmitted key points were also lost when the 2 elders died suddenly. But she believed her son could master the complete storm of 10,000 blossoms. She told him that he was the son she was very proud to have. He thought there was nothing that the son of the poisonous phoenix couldn't master. And so, he received the vein concealment seal from his mother, though he still thought drinking poison was the best way. What others called poison, to him was a miraculous elixir. He thought he should ask Aijin to prepare some poison for him, though he wanted to know what was happening. It was announced that friends were there and insisted on seeing him. Tang Mirio entered his room crying, asking for help. Concerned, he wanted to know what she was asking for. He didn't know what was happening. She explained that, if it continued at this rate, her sister would die. He asked if her sister was dying and suggested she should have gone to a doctor instead. She explained that they had already consulted several doctors. This was something that medicine or medical techniques couldn't fix. He asked what she wanted him to do and if her sister had suffered internal injuries. She explained that the 9-in had cut her meridians, and she was in a terminal condition. In the Northern Sea Ice Palace, as the name suggests, martial artists practiced ice arts. However, those who didn't practice ice arts suffered from terminal conditions. He asked if they were descendants of them. He mentioned if she had been told that descendants of the long-ago Northern Sea Ice Palace had settled in Sichuan. She explained that one of them had married a member of the Tang clan, the strongest clan at the time. However, the clan relied on poisons and hidden weapons, with no practitioners of ice arts or related information. The ancestral ice martial arts were lost long ago, and her sister's illness was considered a hereditary condition. Yomyang said there was a way. At that moment, it was announced that they had already arrived at their residence. Her sister's condition had worsened since they had left home. Tang Mirio cried for her sister to open her eyes. However, it seemed like she was undergoing an ice petrification process. Yomyang noticed that the room was cold enough to freeze. It was more severe than he expected. He told his friend to pay attention, as he couldn't guarantee her sister's survival. This frightened Mirio greatly. He explained that her sister had resisted the cold with innate energy, but now she had reached her limit. He said she was in a state where she blocked everything and concentrated all her energy in her veins. The friend wanted to know if there was any way to save her. The leader explained there was a way to artificially release the cold from her body. However, if her sister couldn't withstand the process or was overwhelmed by the cold, he thought he wanted to help but couldn't risk the life of a friend's family member. Therefore, he was giving her the choice of who would decide whether she should look for another alternative or trust him and try the method. Very upset, she said she had tried every other option and couldn't give up without trying. Though it was dangerous for him as well, she begged him, please, to help her sister get better. Lying down in tears, she asked him to save her sister's life. Taking a deep breath, the leader said they would begin. He explained that it had to be this way, though it was very embarrassing. He mentioned that clothing hindered the energy extraction, so there was no other choice. It was better to feel a bit embarrassed than not to endure. So they began absorbing, removing the cold from the 9 meridians, mouth, heart, lungs, arms, and legs, below the abdomen as well, one by one. He had already removed the cold from the neck upward, and now he needed to remove it from the neck downward. However, a certain part of the body felt a bit awkward, but he couldn't leave it aside. He couldn't stop the process halfway. He placed his fingers on a soft part of the body and began absorbing the cold. The cold's resistance was increasing, and he felt it wouldn't be removed easily. Tang Mirio was afraid that the leader would also get frozen. However, he assured her it was alright. He wanted to be able to extract the yin energy from the upper body's meridians. But now the cold had surpassed what the body could withstand. If he continued, he might freeze to death first. He thought it would be easier if it were a poison, as he had an idea. He recalled what Aijin's grandfather had said and mentioned that the reason there weren't poisons but spiritual pills was that medicine and poison were essentially the same. Medicine became poison depending on concentration and amount. Even if essential yang energy for life, like dragon fire poison or the 10,000-year fire carp, became poison, then he thought that this extreme cold, strong enough to freeze to the bone, could be considered a poison. Thinking this way, he placed his hand on the girl's abdomen and used the poison purification technique. Now the technique was absorbing the cold. He was pleased, as it was already reacting. Once some cold was already extracted, it would resist fiercely. However, if the cold was recognized as poison, he would simply devour it, and it would be no threat. The cold in her body was already disappearing as she slowly opened her eyes. She realized she was in an embarrassing situation and saw a young man she didn't know with his hand on her abdomen. Tang Mirio was very emotional, as her sister was back, albeit quite embarrassed. She couldn't contain her happiness because she wouldn't lose her sister. The sister also, realizing she was alive and recognizing her sibling, the two were in tears. After she woke up, and while he was still finishing the defrosting session, Mirio explained that this person had saved her life. Tang Mirio asked the leader how long he would continue touching her sister. However, the sister told him not to lose focus and let him continue. He was lost in thought, as it was almost like a miraculous remedy. He was surrounded by all that energy, which went beyond a normal body's capacity to absorb all that internal energy. This was the perfect opportunity to absorb all the cold energy and try to open the blocked meridians. One of the meridians was already filling with internal energy. The more they filled, the more energy was absorbed. Altogether, he had managed to open 4 meridians. This was beyond what he had expected, gaining about 4 times his original internal energy. It was a pity that the immediate process had slowed down, but there was nothing to be done. He would try to complete it by drinking poison. That was when he slowly opened his eyes and noticed the two were watching him with his hand on the girl's torso. Blushing, she told him there was no need to be so embarrassed, as her sister had already explained everything that had happened. She didn't even know how to thank him enough. It was then that their father rushed into the house, having heard voices. When he arrived and saw his daughters, one of them with minimal clothing near a young man, he became enraged and challenged the clan leader to a fight. That whole misunderstanding was cleared up, and the father understood that the young master had been protecting and saving his daughter's life. He was embarrassed for having thought so poorly of the leader. He said he had no words to express his gratitude. In tears, he explained that he had stayed there after falling in love with a woman from the Tang clan while managing a trading company. However, his wife had also suffered from a terminal illness and eventually passed away. He had already spent all his savings seeking a cure to save his daughter, but it was in vain. Now he was very happy, as the young man had intervened and helped his daughter improve. The father told the leader that, from that moment on, if he needed him, he would rush to help him immediately. Yeonmyeong was concerned about the trading situation but would discuss that matter later. The young leader was already leaving when he heard his name. Turning around, he saw the young woman, now properly dressed, and her sister, who asked if he was already leaving. The sister thanked him for saving her life, saying that she and her family would never forget his help. Yeonmyeong, deeply blushing, looked at the boy now, unaware of what had happened. His friend, Tang Mirio, was immensely grateful that he had saved her sister. Both of them asked him to stay well and to visit them again soon. The girl noticed he seemed confused and didn't understand why, since nothing had gone wrong with the treatment. The clan leader's sister and friend said it was because he had also enjoyed seeing her. Her sister blushed and said that wasn't true. She didn't think the leader liked having her around. Tang Mirio told her sister that such a reaction was natural. Others besides her would likely have a similar reaction. She said her sister was the most beautiful, and although the leader was reserved, she could tell from his expression that he also liked her. Leaving there quite content, he recalled what the girl's father had said about having a family. Soon after, he imagined his marriage to the girl and the children they might have together. He even imagined the grandchildren that might come from their marriage. How nice it would be to grow old alongside a beautiful girl. He felt nervous just thinking about looking at someone that way in life, imagining what it meant to live a normal life. He hoped for another chance to visit her again. The problem was that her father had said the clan had declined and that the Black Death Alliance had taken control and rarely ventured into the city. The Black Death Alliance and its leader, Yugil-jun, while they hadn't directly overthrown the clan like the Heavenly Demon Lord, still posed a looming threat as long as they remained in the Sichuan province, and an eventual confrontation seemed inevitable. Meanwhile, in Black Death Alliance territory, in the Sichuan province hall, someone was bringing news to the leader of the Transforming Heart sect that the Tang clan had been growing uncontrollably. Lying in her quarters eating an apple, she didn't care what was happening to those people, as it wasn't her problem. The leader's command was absolute, and the hall master Simhwa and the Ascendant Phoenix sect leader, Yuninji, both agreed it would be best to stay quiet until his anger subsided. Annoyed, however, she threw the apple very close to the person. She thought that it was said both the new leader and the clan leader had mastered or were close to mastering the fire realm, and all the leader had told her was to watch and wait. With her current strength, it was impossible to take revenge on Mak In-hoo. But she had an idea. If she couldn't act on her own, she would send a letter to the Tang family, just as the leader had said to invite the clan to the next meeting. She thought that staying idle was impossible, and the leader would understand. Even now, closing her eyes, she could hear Mak In-hoo's screams. She thought her anger would only fade once she eradicated the Tang clan. The messenger, standing before this unstable woman, could do nothing but tremble. He pleaded for his life in vain, as she simply annihilated him. She thought that next, the Tang clan leader would suffer at her hands. In the Moonchan family, they were deciding what they would do now that the family had weakened their positions. The second elder, Tang Myeongshing, wanted to know why they were asking him about this specifically. He looked at the former Poison King, Tang Jiak, who asked why he was bringing that up. The second elder accused young Moonchan, who couldn't gauge his opponent's strength and kept making enemies. Now, because of him, his father was destroying everything he had built over a lifetime. Moonchan thought his uncle was a disgusting old man who couldn't even confront the clan leader. He definitely wanted to heal his arm to take revenge. They were in a meeting planning what to do next with the other elders, and even for them, it was challenging to maintain strength. They decided to leave the clan. Elsewhere, in the storage area of extreme poisons and the 10 poisons of the clan, the young leader arrived, thinking that this place was originally managed by the third elder. But due to negligence, it had been transferred to him and the poison hall. A warrior offered him something to wear before entering the hall. He explained it would block the toxic air from inside the warehouse. It was a poison-repelling pearl. He mentioned that, when held in the mouth, it would filter most of the poisons, preventing them from entering the body. However, he refused and said he didn't need it. But when he heard that several people, including the third elder, had likely held it in their mouths, and that it was cleaned after each use, the young master declined, saying he wouldn't be poisoned. When the warrior insisted, he had to teach him a lesson. He then instructed the next warrior to open the door because he was going in. Entering, he noticed that everything was well preserved, likely because the warehouse was storing the 10 poisons. He understood why the warrior had been so worried about him entering without the pearl. If he were an ordinary person, he would already have been poisoned. Of course, for someone like him, who had mastered the poison refining heart technique, it was as pure as a clean area. He could already feel his inner strength recovering. He observed that he seemed to be consuming poisons equivalent to the 10 poisons, but according to a family rule, he couldn't use all 10. If the recipe still existed, he might ask Aijin to make it. Suddenly, he began to feel a strange sensation. Just one part of the airflow was distorted, as if there were a formation. However, a formation in the poison storage didn't seem to match the Jigo clan's formations. He decided he would just take a look. He soon realized that going deeper led to a passage. A forbidden and sealed talisman was written on it. It was not a Jigo clan formation. He noted that it was the work of a mage. In another life, his master had connections with several of them. Just as his master was obsessed with the sword, they were obsessed with sorcery. They sought to master sorcery and transcend human limits to become immortal. He remembered being thrown into a formation created by a mage as training. It was a place of beasts whose names he didn't even know. However, mages were typically selfish and only involved themselves in things that interested them. Why was there a mage formation inside the Tang clan? Since mages were apparently selfish creatures, they were always obsessed with spirits and demons, seeking immortality. He remembered asking his master how to build a relationship with them. His master had replied that it was simply a matter of hitting them every day for no reason. They would eventually beg to talk. But he doubted anyone in the Tang clan thought like his master. There must be something in the Tang clan that piqued a mage's interest, and it had to be something with incredible power. Originally, he intended to transcend and perhaps use the 10 poisons recipe if it existed, but this seemed more interesting. So, he decided to check it out. As he entered, someone noticed his presence. They realized that the person there wasn't a discreet guest, and didn't even know how much time had passed. But he knew that if too much time passed, he wanted the person to be freed. Yeonmyeong thought that for it to be so well guarded, it could only be the 10 poisons of the Tang clan, said to be completely lost. However, he found that jar wrapped in talismans to be dangerous. He wondered what kind of poison required such precautions. When he placed his hand on it, he realized that the rebound force created by the spell was tremendous, but challenging to break compared to most formations. However, he needed to cut each talisman precisely. He also cut the talismans on the jar. Carefully, he cut all the talismans. He was sweating and felt his inner strength waning due to the venomous vein stimulation technique. Normally, he would have finished it with just one strike, but the poison was much thicker now that the talismans were removed. With his hand on the jar's lid, he wanted to see what was inside. Whatever was inside realized that the talismans were gone. How long had it been since it had seen the light? Quickly leaping out, it cried out that it was free. However, the young leader wouldn't let this go unpunished. He would certainly catch the fugitive. He thought it was fast and needed to strike first before it could catch him. There was an energy around his arm. A snake-like figure wrapped in energy commented that his reaction was quite sharp but liked his response. As a reward for releasing it from the seal, it would kill him painlessly. The snake thought he was foolish and insolent, as he stood before the pinnacle of poisons. It was the Jingo poison, the white-horned blue snake. He asked what a Jingo poison was. The snake noticed that he had managed to block the spread of the sealed poison from the vital point in an instant. She said she would melt his arm and like that energy. However, she realized that his energy was poison-absorbing aura. Why did he have that? What was his connection to the wandering saint? The young man replied that he was his ancestor. She begged him to stop absorbing her poison. At this rate, she would be completely destroyed. Yeonmyeong asked why he should. He wanted to know if she had changed her mind because she was at a disadvantage since he intended to absorb all the poison. The snake thought that this guy truly wanted to destroy her, so she said to wait as she would make him an offer. She claimed it was a deal. She only wanted to escape the seal, and if he spared her, she would become his guardian spirit. Yeonmyeong wanted to know what that meant. The snake explained that she was a guardian spirit and that it would be beneficial to him. She told him he could feel his internal energy increasing with each moment due to her poison. It was a good deal. The young Yomyang thought that, indeed, the poison was incomparable to the 10,000-year fire carp's internal pill, or the dragon fire poison. The guardian spirit could supply poison whenever he needed. It was better to use it continuously than to absorb everything at once. However, the young man said he had no interest in keeping alive someone who was his enemy. He could obtain poison elsewhere. The snake insisted, pleading to be spared just this once, as it had lived hundreds of years trapped, staring at a wall. Making a cute snake face, it promised to obey as his guardian spirit, and said it knew they could make it work. Yomyang said he would believe it just this once. The snake asked if he was accepting. He continued by saying that if it tried anything, he would destroy it on the spot. The snake was aware of this and promised nothing would happen. Yomyang asked what he needed to do to make it his guardian spirit, since he knew nothing about such things. The snake explained that he didn't need to do anything. It was called a spiritual binding seal. By holding it, the spirit would be bound to his soul and become his guardian spirit. The snake landed in his hand, and the young man held it, transmuting that fusion. The warriors outside thought they might be dead and imagined the trouble they would get into. They didn't know what to do, as they hadn't been ordered to enter. One grabbed the pearl, deciding he'd think about the punishment later, placing it in his mouth, covering his face with a cloth, and heading after the young master. Upon entering, he noticed the light surrounding him. Two shouted, not knowing what was happening inside. Moreover, there was a vibration. The eighth asked if the leader was safe and wanted to know what the noise surrounding the clan leader was. Yomyang realized it was the aura of the dragon scale guardian spirit, unlike the usual guardian spirit aura. This was due to the transformation of the poison snake into a guardian spirit. It managed to fill all 12 meridians. From that moment on, he needed to control the energy, and the attention from everyone was overwhelming. His guardian spirit asked if he needed to worry about those people below him. The wandering saint was showing himself openly. However, with 2 fingers, he gave it a smack to help it with manners. After learning some manners, it said that no one could see it unless he allowed it, especially with such a strong aura. He told his guardian it was still very annoying, as he just wanted to live a normal life this time. His guardian, hearing this, felt as if he had died and come back to life. Incidentally, it wanted to know if he could truly do that, for it knew there was a reason he had received the power of the wandering saint, someone like his ancestor before him. The young man asked his guardian spirit if it had been enslaved in another time, but it didn't even want to talk about it. He was forced to work until the day he died. Then a sorcerer was summoned to trap him and seal him in a jar. The guardian, looking at the young man, thought there was a reason for his connection to the sorcerer. It was merely a spirit. Sought by many sorcerers as a guardian spirit, his ancestor had aided its side. Yomyang thought his ancestor might have been similar to his master. He began thinking about what it had said, hinting at a purpose for its existence. He couldn't be sure, but it seemed possible. A warrior from the brigade entered quickly and said they needed to leave immediately. It was in Sichuan, near the main house. There was an attack from the evil faction. Hyanso was carrying his master, who appeared to be seriously injured. However, they were surrounded by several faction members. They encircled them on horseback, questioning why knights from the Orthodox sect were there. The master told his disciple he could leave him there and run, as he would handle the situation. His disciple knew there were hundreds of evil faction members led by the palace lord Jiang Tichin. Those pursuing them said they saw him arrive in Chengdu and that it was clear they sought the Tang clan's help. They said that if they captured them and offered them to the leader, they would receive the best martial arts in return. At that moment, the Tang clan leader and some brigade members arrived. They looked at the master and his disciple, wondering who those dressed in yellow were. They seemed to be martial artists from the righteous faction, so the others should be from the evil faction. They were told to listen to the members of the righteous faction, as they thought they might have come as guests. The disciple, looking around, thought that the rough martial artists on duty were there to help. He noticed that the person he was carrying was severely injured and asked them to step back. At this moment, the brigade leader said he would take care of the person with serious injuries. Hyanso asked the brigade warrior if they shouldn't help, as there were more than 200 martial artists pursuing them. The brigade leader thanked him but said there was no need to worry. He also said that if he didn't believe it, he could just stay and see for himself. One of the wrongdoers, looking at the leader, asked who he thought he was to block their path. He was told that this was the one who won the competition in the Tang clan and returned as the new clan leader. Even so, he wasn't intimidated, finding it amusing, as he looked like just a pretty boy. He asked if he was really thinking of facing him, calling it extreme arrogance. He shouted that they had been spared by the leader's mercy. Smiling, he warned that they had started everything, so they couldn't blame him. But as he said this, they all began to fall, one by one. This was due to the rain of needles the young Tang clan leader had thrown at them. Everyone was shouting for the leader to show no mercy. They would be quickly destroyed. Grabbing more needles to throw, he said he would destroy them all first. With the band leader on the ground, a needle embedded in his skull, Those around him watched as the poison needle landed there. Yeomyang prepared to launch more needles. Quickly, everyone was hit by that rain of needles. The members of the band thought it was madness. However, he noticed he had rushed so much that he hadn't applied poison to the needles. His guardian spirit told him he didn't need to, as the needles had absorbed his poison. Few in the world would survive it. Looking at his guardian, he realized it might be more useful than he thought. Hyunso observed, unable to believe the incredible abilities the clan leader had. The remaining members of the group also couldn't believe how the soldiers had been annihilated in moments. Everyone thought the Tang clan was in decline, and no one mentioned that they had a monster of that level. They urged each other not to panic, saying it was just one guy. Even if that kid had reached the fire realm, he wouldn't have enough energy to use that technique repeatedly. They ordered an attack to take him down so everyone could follow. Facing the leader, he warned it would be his end. Delivering a blow, he asked where all that leader's courage was. After that, he regretted it, as Yeomyang merely held his sword and shattered it. Yeomyang thought that dragon scale was quite effective. However, his opponent noticed he merely blocked the weapon with his hands. Moments later, the shattered pieces of the weapon turned into a storm of 10,000 celestial blossoms. Hyunso thought the Tang clan's secret techniques had been lost after the Demon Lord's invasion. However, he realized he was mistaken. The clan's strength was still incredible. He believed that if they dealt with the Black Death Alliance as Sabak had planned. He noticed the disciple was still there but said he was simply standing in admiration of the young master's abilities. However, the Tang clan leader said they would discuss this later, at the main house. It was then that he realized they should never, under any circumstances, become enemies of the Tang clan. A few days earlier, on the outskirts of Sichuan, the two were eating at a simple inn. However, Hyunso noticed that Sabak seemed unusual. He realized he was more tense than usual. Slowly, the leader of the Black Death Alliance entered, saying he always ate there because he found the place pleasant. Hyunso thought that he was right beside him and hadn't sensed his presence. He must be a highly skilled man. He asked who that man was, but Sabak warned him that he was from the Yu clan. He apologized for interrupting their meal and then asked what brought the two artists from the combined sect to his territory. Hyunso thought he had only entered that remote inn to avoid confrontations with unorthodox factions. Then, that leader asked if they had any business with the alliance, as it seemed they had reached the fire realm. He thought that sending someone like him meant it was very serious. Sabak confirmed they had no business with the Black Death Alliance, and asked if he was there alone. The leader wanted to know what the problem was. He thought he could face him if he was alone, and was willing to spar with him if he wanted. Sabak said that, believe it or not, he had lived twice as long as that young man. The Black Death Alliance leader asked if he was there to pay his respects. Hyunso noticed his friend was more excited than usual. He was indeed planning to fight. The leader saw it as accepted arrogance. Chomchang mentioned that he had destroyed everyone with his own hands 10 years ago. He said that if a fight was what he needed to understand, they could head to a place nearby for a quick match. Hyunso feared for Sabak, but he couldn't stand by after hearing all that. He asked them not to hold him back, as he was going to show that reckless bastard that the martial arts of the joint sect were superior. And so, he ended up fighting with the Black Death Alliance leader. Yeomyang thought it was different from anything he'd seen before. The pursuers arrived later. After all, the Black Death Alliance leader was a frightening guy. Already at the battle site, he prepared to fight. Sabak told him to stay back. However, the leader seemed calm and eager to begin. Hyunso reported that everything happened so quickly he couldn't keep up with his eyes. There were many leaders who thought that sword technique was quite decent. It was fueled by internal energy. It was an impressive idea to use internal energy resonance to repel other energies. Many times, he couldn't keep up with the battle between warriors who had reached the fire realm. He directed his attention to the Tang clan leader because, no matter how hard he tried, the fight seemed beyond his view. He heard the leader say that this wasn't everything, that he should increase his strength since he had boasted so much about energy, as it couldn't be better than that. Sabak said he was ready to show his advanced strength. He was about to reveal the ultimate technique of the joint sect, the true power of the demon sword technique. Sabak was pushing hard. Maybe he would take down the Black Death Alliance leader. But when he looked again, he realized it was he who was attacking. Every attack he launched was purposely blocked at the last second, as if testing him, but being from an unorthodox faction. Sabak launched the demon sword technique, thinking he would end the arrogance right there. The leader laughed and asked if that was how he used it. He dodged it easily, though he thought he defeated him with the secret demon's sword. Even weakened by the fight, he thought he had won. However, the two tried to leave as quickly as possible, but they were stopped, as the enemy had only been testing the magnitude of that technique, to see if it was suitable to jointly accept one of the main orthodox factions, using the amplification of internal energy through the sword, even if it was called a demon sword technique. The two realized he was using the demon sword technique, but only with his fingers. They were shocked. If they had understood the principles, they'd know it didn't have to be exclusively a technique. Repeating the technique, he said he respected its origin. He wanted to change the name. He thought Divine Subjugation Technique would be better. However, he was saying that Yu Gil-jun, the Black Death Alliance leader, used the art of the orthodox faction. And beyond that, the power of the finger technique surpassed the demon sword technique. He stated that if the elder brother hadn't used his remaining internal energy to block him, none of them would be there. Yeonmyang thought that this enemy was definitely at the fire realm. Drawing the leader's attention, he said he and the elder brother had come to this post with a purpose. They sought his cooperation for the great martial arts tournament, the divine cult of the celestial demon. It had already been powerful enough to rival all 9 major sects and other martial arts factions. Even after numerous uprisings in the martial arts world, the orthodox factions did not dare face them. However, the situation began to change when the sect leader's son, Yun Jung-hyuk, emerged. With innate martial talent, he gained personal followers, causing a split in the sect factions. He took his followers out of the sect and founded another cult, the Bright Sky Demon Cult, and this greatly weakened the sect. But they were concerned with the Black Death Alliance in the south, if the alliance moved northward. However, with the prowess he'd seen from the clan leader, they could prevent the Black Death Alliance from advancing north. So they asked him, please, to stop the Black Death Alliance while they eradicated its core, the celestial demon. But the response from the Tang clan leader was negative. Hyunso wanted to know why he refused to help, but he simply repeated his negative response. Hyunso quickly went to inform his brother Sabak of the clan leader's response. He couldn't believe he had refused. The leader had said it wasn't something he could decide alone. He would consult the clan leader and return. He was worried if they couldn't convince him, but they would wait for the response. He told Sabak about another matter he needed to discuss. The state of the Tang clan was very different from what they had expected. As they traveled there, they observed the Tang clan buildings and the martial prowess of the various warriors in training, and the atmosphere among the clan members was completely opposite to the rumors he'd always heard. However, his brother said he had also noticed that there must be some force that instantly revived him. He thought that, somehow, they should bring him to their side. That was when Tang Yuri and her father appeared. They said he was responsible for the clan's general affairs and that the clan leader had ordered him to bring the two of them. Arriving in the presence of the current leader, they realized it was a woman who introduced herself as Tang Jaihai. She stated that she was the acting leader of the Tang clan of Sichuan. They could sense the presence of energy. It was definitely the fire realm. Now they understood why the clan had regained its strength. The martial prowess of the clan leader was astonishing, and the interim clan leader was also in the fire realm. When they told her that their sect urgently needed support to eradicate an evil sect, they asked her to consider it. However, her son had already refused once. She asked him if he still felt the same way. His response was affirmative. Then they asked the clan leader why he still thought that way, as if it were impossible to stop the evil sect. The leader responded that, as far as he understood, the Black Death Alliance did not harass common people. They collected protection fees but also eliminated bandits, acting almost like the orthodox factions. In such a situation, they had no justification for attacking them first. When the Black Death Alliance and the Finger of the Bright Sky Demon invaded and destroyed a Tang clan, he had heard that none of the orthodox factions had come to help. He understood that they should prioritize their own sect's safety, and wasn't blaming anyone for it. But now they sought help under the guise of eradicating evil sects. The clan leaders' words were so heavy they couldn't lift their heads. They preached justice but only acted when their own sects were threatened. Upon hearing this, the elder brother thought he might be getting angry again. So he simply said they were willing to pay a fair price for the help, and asked her to please consider it. Yeonmyang said that, since they had put it that way, they could discuss the forces they might deploy. But first, he wanted to know how much they were willing to pay. However, they left feeling quite shaken. The price to be paid was several years' worth of their sect's maintenance costs. They commented that they must be very confident to demand such a sum. Certainly, the clan leader's martial prowess was impressive, but it was uncertain. Perhaps the clan leader was at the same, or even a higher level. Yeonmyang, watching them, began to wonder if they had noticed they were keeping their meridians open. He was a more perceptive observer than he seemed. It wasn't just about extracting money. The son explained that it wasn't sudden since they mentioned the good Black Death Alliance, but he didn't trust them. However, it was true that order had been maintained after the fall of all major factions, and it was because of one man, Yu Gil-jun. He knew the only reason they were classified as an evil faction was that they didn't join the orthodox faction. If things went slightly wrong, they would push their competitors aside and plant spies to bring down other clans or invade. The current order was a temporary phenomenon. If Yu Gil-jun disappeared one day, the evil factions, his mother knew that, indeed, it was like cutting the problem off at the root. She understood his perspective, and wanted to know what he planned to do. He said the plan was simple. he just needed to prevent them from moving northward. He explained that instead of blocking them from the outside, he would disrupt them internally so they couldn't leave. It made sense, but she wanted to know how he would reach him. The challenger explained that they had recently sent an invitation. His mother was shocked to learn they had sent an invitation for a gathering in Sichuan. Unlike in the past, the gathering was a tournament where young masters from the evil factions competed. If it was as he suspected, they wouldn't abandon their malicious intentions, and that was when he would eliminate them all. It was said that when Yanjiang arrived at the Tang clan, she was sure she wouldn't do anything to offend the leader. She also remembered that the fate of the main clan depended on her. The young woman asked him not to worry. Her Tang clan leader was indeed an extraordinary man. She would win him over. Aijin was speaking with Master Tihil, who had brought food and medicine. The two orthodox visitors asked the young man to come in. Aijin asked if his internal injuries were improving. Excited, he said that thanks to his grandfather's medicine, it had been very effective. However, at first, he was anxious to drink it because it contained some poisonous herbs and plants. But after drinking it, his internal injuries quickly improved. He thought that, at this rate of recovery, he would soon be able to return to their sect. He mentioned that it was a bit noisy outside that day and asked if something was happening. It was commented that it was likely because Jiggle was returning. This was a surprise to both, as the Tang clan and the Jiggle clan had maintained close relations for a long time. This time, they agreed to create a defensive formation in the outer grounds. Hyunso had heard about their friendship, but setting up a formation, he didn't know much about formations but guessed it was expensive. One of them asked if the Tang clan was covering the costs, and the young man replied that it was the Jiggle clan who was paying for everything. And according to the clan leader, the Jiggle clan was very cooperative. The two concluded that the patrol members must have discovered some weakness. Jiggle and his niece were about to enter the clan leader's office. He was giving her final instructions, and she assured him not to worry, as she knew herself well. There wasn't a man who wouldn't be charmed by her beauty. Her uncle thought she did indeed remind him a bit of his sister, once hailed as a beauty in Hubei. The young woman said winning the heart of a young man shouldn't be difficult. Jiggle recalled how, more than a decade ago, the bright sky demon lord had attacked the clan, targeting his sister, and that, thanks to her noble sacrifice, the main family narrowly escaped destruction. Driven by the shame of being reduced to a toy for a night, she ultimately took her own life. Jiggle thought he couldn't allow such a tragedy to befall the main family again. If his niece developed a deep relationship with the Tang clan leader, they could preserve the lineage. He was placing the family's future in her hands. They were at the door when they were welcomed and heard that during the competition, the young leader had greatly aided in the clan's formation. Jiggle wasn't prepared to see the interim leader. She was now setting up a defensive formation throughout the outer grounds. As acting leader, she was truly grateful. He looked at her and thought she must be the leader's mother. Like son, they really had a blessed lineage. However, he was so taken aback by her presence that he didn't realize he had lost his train of thought. Apologizing for not greeting her immediately, she didn't mind, as he hadn't been there when she took charge. She was understanding. She told him he must be tired from the journey and to rest well before starting work. She also noticed the young lady next to him, who introduced herself as his niece, brought to strengthen ties between the clans. She heard her uncle asking her to greet the clan leader. She simply stared at the leader, who was very handsome. Realizing she had been looking at him for too long, she decided to introduce herself formally. She greeted them both and introduced herself, though a bit late, sincerely congratulating them on becoming the acting clan leader. The interim leader thought the girl was very well-mannered and told her she was very beautiful and that, in a few years, many young men would have broken hearts over her. She bowed to the leader and thanked her. The interim leader remembered that she had been quite popular in her youth as well. The young woman said the interim leader was still very beautiful and that, upon seeing her for the first time, she thought she was the clan leader's sister. The girl thought that with such a lovely and kind mother, it was no wonder the leader was so impressive. The interim leader said that since the girl was the same age as her son, she hoped the two would grow closer while she was there. The girl replied that she was pleased with this since her older brother from the main family never showed her affection. She let a small tear fall to see if this would elicit a reaction to her story. She looked at the leader, who was yawning in boredom. Uncle and niece realized they were ignoring the sad story of a beautiful young woman that didn't seem convincing. Yanjiang found it strange, as wherever she went, all the boys fawned over her. However, his thoughts were somewhere far away. After being ignored, uncle and niece felt they had failed. It was the first time the girl felt humiliated, as she hadn't even been noticed. However, his mother pinched his cheeks, asking him to greet the young lady. When she looked at him, she was sure she would get him to notice her. Elsewhere in Sichuan City, in the territory of the Black Death Alliance, rumors about the Tang clan leader spread. They said he would be attending the gathering, but due to his actions, the other factions wouldn't remain idle. In the preparation hall for the gathering, The first page detailed the necessary budget for the event, and on the second page were the participating factions and clans. The leader of kings, the Demon Lord, thought the report was sufficient to present to the hall. Yeo Seorian spoke as if merely fulfilling her duty as a servant of the leader. Everyone found it quite amusing, as it seemed the leader had put the report aside and left more often than he had anticipated. In the middle of the meeting, a child entered, saying she wanted to go to the Sichuan gathering this time. She jumped onto her uncle, who asked why she had previously said it was too much trouble, what had changed her mind. She explained that she heard the leader of the Tang clan would be attending the gathering, so she wanted to go. They said all the girls in Chengdu were in love with him. How handsome must he be? So, she decided that if it were true, she would have to make him her husband. He told her to stop saying such things because it would shock her father. Anyway, she could go and see if she wanted, for even if he said no, she would go regardless. Besides, who could stop the will of the daughter of the Black Death Alliance leader? Tang Mirio was brushing her sister's hair and admiring how beautiful it was. She said it hardly seemed as if she had been bedridden all that time. She mentioned how the last time Yeomyang had come there, he had been quite obvious. She asked her sister what she thought of the clan leader. Just mentioning him made her sister blush immediately. Tang Mirio found it amusing. Simply hearing his name made her sister's breathing unsteady. She was concerned about whether her sister's health was genuinely okay. She asked her sister if the young master would go to the Sichuan gathering. She thought she wouldn't see him for a long time. After all, the gathering was essentially a meeting of dark forces, and she thought it might be too dangerous. Tang Mirio said it would be risky if he met a girl from that faction who fell in love with him. Her sister became very sad and thoughtfully said that would be terrible. Tang Mirio suggested that they should also go to the Sichuan gathering. She thought the clan leader might be bothered by their presence. Pulling her sister by the arm, she told her not to worry because she already had everything planned. Meanwhile, in the leader's office, Jigel's niece expressed a desire to go with him as his servant. She told the clan leader she had heard that the young masters of the dark forces would compete there. Regarding this, Yeomyang thought it wouldn't be an issue, as he had been told he could bring a bodyguard and a servant. However, he reminded her that this was not a vacation trip. Tang Mirio burst into the young clan leader's office. Yeomyang was excited and said he had sensed a presence approaching. Of course, it had to be her. Happily, he said that she and her sister wanted to tell him something. Tang Mirio was staring at Yanjiang, who had been in the room before they entered. Maintaining her fierce gaze, she asked who that girl was, who returned her gaze and asked in kind. Yeomyang might have known too. Miss Miso asked what was going on. Tang Mirio explained that she and her sister wanted to attend the gathering with him. He was briefly startled. He asked if she wanted to go as a bodyguard and Miss Miso as his servant. She emphasized to him that this was the perfect choice, trying to ignore the girl who was already there. She quickly noticed that they behaved this way because they had a very close relationship with the clan leader. She also saw that Miss Miso had a unique beauty. She thought she was as beautiful as the clan leader's mother. She thought that if a woman like her accompanied him, her plan would be ruined. However, the leader said he was happy that she wanted to be the bodyguard. Nevertheless, he couldn't take Miss Miso. He said he already had someone for the servant role. At that moment, she became angry and said that if he wouldn't take her sister, she wouldn't go either. Yeomyang, unfortunately, would have to find someone else to go in her place. Her sister tried to calm Mirio, telling her it was okay if she couldn't go. Despite feeling very sad, she told her sister she could go alone. Upset, she said it was fine. She could go if she wanted to, but if the clan leader didn't want her around, there was no need to force it. Mirio, curious, called the leader to talk in another place. She asked him why he was so insensitive toward others if he knew she was there and acting like that. Her sister wanted to go. Why wouldn't he let her? Especially since he also had feelings for her. She said it seemed like he was pushing away the opportunity that was right in front of him. However, he replied that this wasn't going to be a vacation trip. It could turn into a battlefield. They didn't know what would happen during the confrontations with the young masters of the dark faction. He didn't want to leave her sister exposed to a danger he couldn't protect her from. Who did she think would be held accountable? Seeing more of the Black Death Alliance's territory, they might even have to face their leader. Considering she was still recovering and not fully strong, it would be hard to face them. Tang Mirio accepted the situation since he had explained why he chose someone else instead of her sister. However, she made it clear that she would go too if her sister couldn't go either. Jigo was exhausted from working so much in such a short time. When he was suddenly surprised by the young master, who asked why he was just standing there, he quickly responded that the defensive formation was already complete. He was just adjusting the final details. Yeomyang said he would manage right away. Everything was in order. He looked to see if he had set up the formation as he had been told. He noticed he had centered it around the poison hall, passing through the medical wing, leaving and reaching the general affairs office. But Jigo affirmed that all key points of the clan were protected. He reported that, as he had commanded, it was finished within the set time frame, and he asked if the given time was sufficient, as they had managed it. Yeonmyung, placing a hand on his shoulder, told him he could do it if he wanted. He just needed to complete the remaining tasks quickly. Jiggle thought a simple "thank you" wouldn't have hurt. Yeonmyung hoped for the best to happen, even if attacked while he was away, and that he would be well protected. He thought that now all that was left was to tie up some loose ends, so he called one of the elders. Facing Elder Tang Jirong, he said he heard he was skilled with a sword, which was why he had become an elder. Even the hilt of the sword he had shown the other day was a bit out of reach. So frustrated, he said he was aware of the difference between them. Of course, with his skills, he wasn't even close. That's why he thought he could give him some pointers on how to use the sword. Of course, it wouldn't be for free. He was offering a condition for following orders from that point on. However, he assured him that such an opportunity didn't come every day. He should consider this a stroke of luck. He asked if the elder was willing to switch sides. Hyunso and his brother were saying their goodbyes, grateful for the hospitality. They thanked them for joining their cause. On behalf of the Gordong sect, they expressed their gratitude. Sabik said that thanks to them, his internal injuries were fully healed. The interim leader thanked them for their words and said they were also sending some elders and warriors to help. Sabik, very pleased, said he would send a payment as soon as he returned to their sect. The interim leader hoped everything would go well with him. She thanked the clan leader, for if it weren't for him, both he and his disciple would have been in trouble. She remarked that he possessed martial prowess far beyond his age. She saw that he would soon even surpass her. However, when she took his hand, she sensed a monstrous presence. Hyunso noticed something strange and asked his older brother why his face was pale. Bidding farewell to everyone, he said they would return to his sect. However, he wasn't sure if it was his imagination or if the leader truly had a very powerful presence. The reason for the Tang clan's resurgence wasn't just the clan leader but also the youngest clan leader. As they said the clan's motto, "Repay kindness twice over and evil tenfold." The leader was recalling their motto. Since they had agreed to help, they should consider the fate of everyone there. They understood and would fight with strength, wisdom, and honor. They wished everyone luck in the battle. Aijin handed over the poison case he had filled with elixir to Yeonmyung. He asked, with some doubt, why he always took the same poison. He simply responded that he felt more familiar with it, and that there was no other poison like his. He said that everyone was waiting for him. He didn't need to, but preferred to be sure and asked him to come back alive. His spiritual guardian wanted to know if he was truly as young as he claimed. Yeonmyung knew why he was asking such a personal question out of nowhere. However, it wasn't an exaggeration to say he had surpassed many veteran warriors who had roamed the martial world for decades. The sword technique he used when recruiting the elder was several levels above the sword masters he had encountered alongside the invisible guest. He simply replied that if people like the Black Death Alliance leader existed, then people like him could exist too. He asked him to leave aside unnecessary curiosity, as he wasn't even a dragon. They were leaving, and Mirio was calling Yeonmyung, asking where he had gone. He quickly replied that he had gone to get poison from Aijin. Well, he asked who that was with them. He was Jang Gil, and he was there to guide them to Chengdu. He said he would ensure a smooth journey for them. The young master replied that he was counting on them. He then bid farewell to his mother, saying he was already on his way. They said their goodbyes to the clan, as they were already leaving. The clan's interim leader said they didn't need to be so formal. She told her son that the wind would blow along any path he chose in life, that she wanted to support him, but that he shouldn't push himself too hard. She knew that, being the son of the poisonous phoenix, he would do well in life. She hoped everyone would be safe and look after the clan leader. Then she told everyone to go with calm and peace. Sichuan Hainyang was bustling, as they were expecting the gathering, and everything had turned into a festival. The two were amazed, as it really looked like a festival. Mirio thought it looked different from the last time she was there. She had been there a few times when her father was running the merchant company. He mentioned that her father had talked about it. If the clan grew, it would be beneficial to have a merchant company to maintain financial stability. They couldn't rely on the elders' diverted funds and the profits from the medical wing forever. He told her that after everything was over, she should talk to her father about it. He was planning to help him restart the merchant business. Outside the sword forge, someone was sleeping, as there weren't even any customers. Frustrated, he hoped someone would show up, as it was another slow day. Someone told him they couldn't hear any hammering from that place and asked if it wasn't open for business. Yeonmyung spoke to that man, saying he was there to see the swords. The man was pleased, as he noticed the young man looked familiar. He welcomed him and said he would show him the swords. Observing them, Yeonmyung noticed that the swords were of good quality and that the blade was in excellent condition. The sharpness level was impressive. The owner had every right to boast. It was perfect, although lacking a bit in decoration. The sharp aura was striking. The man was impressed that just by touching it a few times and looking at it, Yeonmyung could tell all of that. He said that all the swords there seemed to be of high quality, and that he would choose one that matched him. Excited, the man told him to wait a moment, as he'd be right back. He went to get a box and asked Yeomyang to open it, very proud of himself. When the young man opened it, he realized it was indeed a masterpiece. It was called the Demon Slayer Sword. He presented the Demon Slayer Sword. It was truly an impressive sword. Yanjiang, even as someone with little knowledge of swords, could see how fantastic it was. He shared that his master had started forging it but had passed away due to illness. That's when he took over and finished the sword, now asking what he thought of it. He proudly said it was worthy of being called a masterpiece. Yeomyang felt it was on par with the sword he used in his past life and could sense the sharpness it constantly radiated. Although it was a very bright sword, he really didn't need a blade of that caliber. On the contrary, he thought the man should be proud of the sword he had crafted. However, he felt that a sword like that would draw unnecessary attention. A simpler sword would suit him better. So, he would pay for the one he had chosen before. Disheartened, the man said if that's what he thought was best. As he was finalizing the purchase, some troublemakers arrived, asking what was going on. The forged man addressed him as young Master Yun, looking quite scared. But the young man said he had ordered the best sword and that he was using it to deceive. He wanted to know how a mere blacksmith could dare mock him. The blacksmith tried to say it was just a misunderstanding. Yeomyang, looking at those people, thought there was something strange about them, as if they were bodyguards. He sensed something was wrong. His spiritual guardian said he knew something felt off. It was the demonic energy. The guardian had faced it a few times before with the invisible guest. He just didn't know what those demon sect bastards were doing in Sichuan. He ordered Yeomyang to step aside, as he would take care of the blacksmith, and if he didn't move, he'd deal with him first. He struck him with just 2 fingers, calling him nothing but a foul mouth. A simple blow was enough to unsettle that troublemaker. The guards didn't like what they saw happening to their master one bit. Yeomyang even said that at his level, it didn't matter if the sword was good, he wouldn't be able to wield it properly. The bodyguard asked how he dared lay a hand on Namjoon's grandson, the lord of the Hyeonyang sect, under the Black Death Alliance. However, the Tang clan leader didn't care about that man's status. He went straight to the point and asked what connection they had with the demon sect. He stood there, staring at them, waiting for an answer. Displeased, they asked how he dared to slander their sect in that way. They asked their young master to stand behind them. They thought they could settle the score. After eliminating all the bodyguards, he said that from that moment on, the Celestial Moon Brigade would be responsible for young Master Yun. He ordered the remaining members to take care of the others. He was surprised, but he thought the occupation was perfect. He just didn't know how he had noticed them. He responded that it was because the stench of those demon sect scoundrels reeked from a mile away. How could he not notice? He asked him if, even seeing what was happening to the bodyguards, he didn't feel any sense of urgency. He told him he might want to worry about what he held in his hand rather than simply filling it up. From his perspective, those fallen men were all the same. The leader asked him to protect Master Yun while he taught that man a lesson. Then they roughly pulled that young man who only knew how to scream. Yeomyang noticed that, despite his rudeness, the loud young man had no idea who they were. To them, it didn't matter to stop and think about things instead of fearing them. When they tried to attack him, he simply dodged. Right afterward, he broke their swords. Some were curious, thinking they had been faster than him. He thought he had been defeated and felt he needed to counter him quickly. However, he simply fell to the ground, and the others watched the scene. The girls were terrified but tried to keep their composure. The young man who had picked a fight with Ferreira was almost crying with fear. They looked at that young man holding a sword and the other kneeling in front of him. After swinging the sword, Yeomyang realized it was a masterpiece. The weight distribution between the hilt and the blade was nearly perfect. This is the blacksmith who had done a true master's work. He said his master had created a masterpiece. He added that he, continuing the legacy, was also quite remarkable. Every master said that the valuable goal was to eventually find the rightful owner. He could see that the sword itself would one day find its master. He left instructions that he should only give the sword to someone who could truly appreciate its value. He happily thought he had found the rightful owner of the Demon Slayer sword. Looking at them with his sword in hand, Yeomyang asked who would be next to try their luck. They all came at once, attempting to attack him simultaneously. That only brought a slight smile to his face. After all, it was just what he wanted, a chance to train a bit more. The girls were already too tired to be surprised by anything he did. They weren't quite sure when he had learned swordsmanship. Someone remarked that everything was going so smoothly, all too easy. He thought those Black Death Alliance scoundrels had no idea he was from the Divine Celestial Demon sect. He believed that Yeo Sochong's son had the martial talent to lead the Yun clan lineage. He thought that if he managed to have him showcase his martial skills at the gathering, it would be the first step in weakening their power once they realized what was happening. The demonic path would have already dominated Sichuan. his henchmen arrived shouting loudly, severely wounded. He found it odd when a brigade member escorted Sochong. They reported that young Master Yun was being attacked by a masked assailant. Meanwhile, in that place, Yeomyang was finishing off the remaining ones. He was almost done clearing everything there. Mirio wanted to know who would take care of that mess. She asked if he was at ease with that, as she had seen one of them running off yelling for reinforcements. He replied that he had let him go on purpose, saying that fool didn't even know what was happening within the demon sect. He said there must be someone who had hired those guys to protect. The young man continued to yell that he wasn't part of the demon sect and didn't even know who those people were. Yeomyang, placing the sword lightly on his neck, told him that he would find out. When the others arrived, they could ask. It didn't take long to hear shouting, ordering them to leave. His father had returned with the army, and was shouting to let his son go. He said if they resisted, they would cut them all up and feed the pieces to the pigs. However, he came out and said he was there. He asked what he thought he could do, saying this with a sword at the young men's necks. The girls wanted to know who the real villain was there. They noticed there were many of them, and they didn't know what Yeomyang's plan was. Hyunso Nam was shouting about how he was using something without even knowing who he was messing with. He replied that he was dealing with the demon cult, and that he could feel the sinister energy coming from them. It was demonic energy. They might have tried to hide their identity, but they came to Sichuan to cause trouble. However, he wasn't sure if the Black Death Alliance was aware of that fact. He recognized the suppressed demonic energy, and it was a fact that he emerged unscathed, even though the Celestial Moon Brigade had tried to attack him. He knew the man was dangerous and should be silenced, so he shouted that, in the name of the Yun clan, he commanded the Celestial Moon Brigade to use the reverse blood demon technique. Mirio began to fear, as this was the technique the Lord of the Bright Heaven Demon used when he invaded the Tang clan. They all became incredibly powerful and different. That's when he noticed that the Yun clan was connected to the Yun Junghyun clan. However, Hyunso Nam wanted to know if that was all he wanted to ask before being annihilated. Yeomyang said he had no personal grudge against him, but the clan he belonged to had been destroyed by them. At that moment, Hyunso Nam, very pleased, shouted that there was no clan his brother hadn't destroyed. He asked where he was from, as he would eliminate him along with his entire clan. Jigel's niece began to feel shaken, thinking they would all be exterminated. However, she had no choice but to trust the young master, so she ordered the Celestial Moon Brigade to eliminate him. His spiritual guardian asked what his plan was, seeing how eager the enemy was. Yeomyang grew irritated with his guardian for asking what he intended to do. He said he would simply cut them down. He steadied his sword, as he was about to eliminate them all. He began the retaliation, painting the ground in various shades. Hyunso Nam was somewhat perplexed, thinking it would be very easy to win against a single man. The blacksmith was terrified, as he had never seen anything of that magnitude. The girls felt relieved, knowing they had done well to trust their leader. The enemy thought it was impossible for the 70 warriors of the Celestial Moon Brigade, using the reverse blood demon technique, to lose. It reminded him of the time in the cult, when the left guardian of the Celestial Demon cult and the right guardian were wounded after the vice leader nomination ceremony. That's when he declared that the victor was Yun Junghyun. It was similar to his brother's martial trial, which even surpassed the left and right guardians. That overwhelming presence hadn't been felt since that day, and he was sensing it in this man. Realizing it was impossible to defeat him, he knelt and begged for mercy. He pleaded to spare at least So Chong and that, if he gave up his life, he should at least spare the child. He said he didn't know what grudge he held against the Celestial Demon cult, but that child was different from him. He begged to let him go. Yeomyang didn't believe he was an ordinary person. He asked if it was common in the Celestial Demon cult to try to kill a blacksmith just because he didn't provide a good sword. The innocent young man opened his mouth and lost his head. Yeomyang told his father that he understood if he was angry. He explained that the families of the people he had hurt felt the same way. He told him he had no intention of sparing anyone from the Celestial Demon cult. He ordered him to stop talking and head straight to hell. Yeomyang asked the blacksmith if he was really going to give him the sword. The blacksmith said that if he hadn't been there, he wouldn't even be alive at that moment, and to consider it payment for his help. Everything would be as his master had wished. The sword had found its true owner. Mirio spoke to the clan leader, asking why he was hesitating if he was meant to use it. Yeomyang said that if that's what they wanted, he would use it. However, since the sword stood out too much, he wanted a simple sheath to store it. His spiritual guardian thought that each time he looked at him, he was more impressed. He could call him a master of swords and believe it. He knew that when that child grew, he would be an even greater monster than Yongir. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.